Chapter 129. Because of Xia Mingming's sudden disappearance and the two ominous signs in the morning, Yu Shu felt uneasy. At night, after Yu Xiaoku and Jing Chen fell asleep, she quietly got up, touched the match on the table and quietly went out the door. There was a bamboo lantern hanging in the corridor on the second floor. The dim light shone on the place where Yu Shu left her room. The room she chose was the one in the middle upstairs, and Xia Mingming's room was next to hers. The corridor was very quiet, and the guards who were patrolling at night were all downstairs. Yu Shu looked outside to make sure there was no one outside, and then she stepped out, closed the door behind her, and walked next door with the help of the wall. She reached out and pushed the door, and with a soft squeak she went next door. The room was dark. Yu Shu and Yu Xiaoxiu had come to find Kim Bao a few days ago, so she still had some impression of the furnishings in the room. She felt her way to the table, lit the oil lamp on the table, and the room was instantly lit up. She walked around the room with the oil lamp, trying to find some clues, but to her disappointment, the room was very clean. Bai Qing must have asked the boatman to clean the room at night after she confirmed that Xia Mingming had left. The quilt on the bed was neatly folded, and the stool on the table was placed very orderly. There was nothing unusual. She extinguished the oil lamp in disappointment and put it back on the table. She thoughtfully retreated to the door, opened it and closed it. When she turned around, she bumped into a wall of people. She was so startled that she took a step back and grabbed the door frame in a panic to not fall to the ground. "What are you doing here?" Yu Shu looked up and saw Qiu Biao's unfriendly face in front of her. Her mind turned quickly and she giggled, "I came out to pee at night but went to the wrong room." As she said this, she squeezed past him and reached the door of her room in 2 or 3 steps. She looked back at Qiu Biao and without waiting for him to speak, she shrank back into the room and closed the door with a bang. Qiu Biao frowned as he watched her disappear. He raised his hand to close Xia Mingming's door and walked to Yu Shu's room. He stood there for a while, his ears twitching. When he heard that there was no movement in the room, he turned around and went downstairs. On the bed, Yu Shu watched as the figure outside the door disappeared before she let out a sigh of relief. She covered her nose with her hand and sniffed, recalling the smell she smelled when she bumped into Qiu Biao. After thinking for a moment, her eyes flashed. Qiu Biao's clothes actually had the fragrance of Xia Mingming's powder. The two of them must have been in close contact today. How could a girl like Xia Mingming get so close to a man, unless it was involuntarily? In this case, Xia Mingming's sudden disappearance made sense. Assuming that the boatman lied and Xia Mingming did not leave without saying goodbye this morning and did not fall into the river, then there was only one possibility for her disappearance. She was still on the boat and was hidden somewhere. Yu Shu was very sure that there was something wrong with Qiu Biao. If Xia Mingming was hidden by Qiu Biao, then she must know something. Lying on the bed with her hands behind her head, Yu Shu frowned. Qiu Biao was the captain of the guards of the caravan. If he had bad intentions, then the people on the boat would be in danger. Maybe the flood mentioned in the divination was this incident. Should she go and discuss it with Bai Qing? No, Bai Qing and Qiu Biao were also a bit impulsive. If she told him now and accidentally caused trouble, then she would beat the grass and alert the snake. Moreover, all of this was just her hypothesis. The probability did not mean that it would definitely happen. It seemed that she still had to find Xia Mingming first. After thinking for a whole night, Yu Shu woke up early the next morning and woke up Yu Xiaoxiu. She put Kim Bao in a bamboo cage and gave him a few words before leaving. Yu Shu wanted to find Xia Mingming on the boat. She was afraid that if she made too much noise, it would arouse Qiu Biao's suspicion. So she used Kim Bao as a cover and searched upstairs and downstairs. If someone asked, she said that her little pet ran away. Just like that, she felt her way from the second floor to the first floor and wandered around the deck before finally finding the bottom cabin. Yu Shu met Qiu Biao in the bottom cabin. Qiu Biao had already heard from others that Yu Shu was looking for something. Seeing her looking around, he did not stop her and asked her. Instead, he gave a look to his men. After a while, Yu Shu found that no matter where she went, there was someone following her. She sneered in her heart, but on the surface she pretended not to see it and searched the bottom cabin. Sure enough, she found a suspicious place. In the dark corner of the entrance to the bottom cabin, in an inconspicuous place, there were 2 round wooden barrels. The height reached Yu Shu's chest and the lid was sealed. The space inside was enough to fit a person. The reason she was suspicious wasn't because of the barrels themselves, but because as soon as she approached, someone called out to her, "That bucket is filled with rancid water. When the boat docks, we have to throw it away. Don't touch it. If your hands get stained, you won't be able to wash it off." Yu Shu's hand stopped half a foot away from the barrels. She turned her head to look at the guard who had been following her since the beginning and then looked at the barrels. Her face revealed a look of disgust. When she turned around, she put her hand behind her back. At an angle that the guard couldn't see, she knocked her fingers on the 2 barrels. From the vibration that came back to her fingers, she immediately found something different. Of the 2 barrels, one was empty. This discovery immediately made Yushu excited. At this time, the guard suggested that she go to the kitchen to look. She took the opportunity to leave the bottom cabin. Before she left, she didn't forget to glance at the 2 barrels in the corner to remember which one was empty. After a cursory look around the kitchen, Yushu hurried back upstairs. She closed the door and rushed to the window, ignoring Yu Xiaoxiu's questions. She opened the window and stuck her head out to look down. The entrance to the lower deck was right below. As soon as she lowered her head, she could see the stairs leading downstairs from the deck. There was a guard standing nearby as well as 2 shipwrights. A moment later, Qiu Biao brought his men up from the lower deck and headed east. Yushu's nails clawed at the window. She quickly calculated in her mind how she could divert the people near the bottom cabin away so that she could go in and check the barrels. Her shoulder was patted lightly. Yushu came back to her senses. She turned her head and saw Jing Chen standing behind her, dressed neatly. He looked at her with a slightly worried expression. He raised his left hand and clenched it into a fist. Then he opened it again and shook his palm twice. After Jing Chen lost his ability to speak, he always relied on writing on Yushu's hand to communicate with her. After a long time, Yushu felt that it was troublesome. Thus, she figured out a few simple hand gestures and taught them to him. Using them as sign language, it made it easier for him to express some simple meanings. For example, right now he was asking her, "What happened?" Yushu shook her head. Looking at Jing Chen's weak body, she felt depressed. If Jing Chen was not injured, then things would be much easier. She could swagger to get Xia Mingming out. If Qiu Biao dared to turn against her, she could let Jing Chen beat him to the ground. Thinking of this, she suddenly thought of a question. She hesitantly asked Jing Chen, "Let me ask you, do you still remember that you know martial arts?" Jing Chen tilted his head. His eyes were confused. Yushu understood his expression. Her face fell. Unwilling to give up, she stretched out her hand and gestured. "Martial arts. It's like this. It's used to fight. You were very powerful in the past. You knew Qinggong, you could walk on walls, and you could even use a sword. Do you remember that you have 2 swords? Jing Chen looked at her expectant eyes. He knew that whether or not he knew martial arts was very important to her. He didn't know why he didn't want to shake his head and tell her that he didn't remember. His lips moved and he lowered his head to avoid her gaze. Seeing this, Yushu understood. Although she was disappointed, she didn't want to see him blaming himself for doing something wrong. She smiled and comforted him. "If you don't remember, then don't remember. You treasure those 2 swords. If you really remember that you lost them, you will definitely be heartbroken. It's better not to remember." Only then did Jing Chen raise his head. Seeing that there was no reproach on her face, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He took her hand off his shoulder and wrote in her palm, "I will remember." N. Yu Xiaoxiu was at the side. When he saw Jing Chen holding Yushu's hand, he couldn't stand it anymore. He walked over and forced his way in between them, separating them. He pretended to look outside the window and asked Yushu, "What were you looking at?" Yushu shook her head. She returned to the bed and sat down. After thinking for a long time, she decided to discuss with Bai Qing. Xia Mingming had really been locked in the wooden barrel for a day and a night. If he stayed any longer, she was afraid that his life would be in danger. The most important thing now was to rescue him. "You said that Xia Gongzi is locked in the wooden barrel at the bottom of the cabin?" Bai Qing stood up in astonishment and was about to walk out. "Come, let's go see." Yushu hurriedly pulled him back. "Uncle Bai, wait. I haven't finished speaking. If you go there rashly, won't you alert the enemy?" Alert the butterfly. Yushu was afraid that he would be impulsive, so she simply told him her suspicions about Qiu Biao. "Last night I saw Captain Qiu. I smelled the fragrance of Xia Gongzi's sachet on him. That's why I suspected him. He must have a reason to lock Xia Gongzi up. I just don't know what he wants." After Bai Qing heard this, he angrily slammed the table. "This Qiu Biao, what is his intention? No, I have to ask him." He was about to walk out again, but Yushu firmly pulled him back. After a lot of persuasion, she made him sit down again. "Uncle Bai, calm down and think about it. If we go to Qiu Biao now, what can we say? If we really fall out with him, he has 20 guards under him. I'm afraid we'll be the ones at a disadvantage. Why don't we first rescue Xia Gongzi and ask him about the situation? He must know some inside information. After listening to her advice, Bai Qing's face darkened. He thought for a moment and said, "How about this? In a moment I will gather everyone on the ship to the bow. You take the opportunity to go to the bottom of the cabin to rescue him. After you've rescued him, bring him to your room first." "Okay." Yushu readily agreed. Bai Qing stood up and said, "I'll send someone to gather them. You go back to your room first. Come out when you hear something." The two of them went out one after another. Yushu went back to her room to wait. After about the time it took to eat a meal, a boatman knocked on the door and said that Boss Bai wanted everyone to go to the bow. He had something to say. After sending the boatman away, Yushu walked to the window and looked down. After seeing that everyone near the bottom of the cabin had left, she quietly led Yu Xiaoxiu downstairs. They went around the back door to the stern, and then from the stern to the bottom of the cabin. They found something to pry open the empty wooden barrel hidden in the corner. Although it was dark, Yushu could still see the figure curled up in the moldy barrel. Chapter 130. Yushu and Yu Xiaoxiu pour Xia Mingming out of the bucket. The sundries in the bucket can be used as a weight. Even if someone touches the bucket, they won't find out that the person inside is gone without opening it. They go back to the second floor. Jing Qin is sitting on the edge of the bed, holding the bamboo cage that Yushu threw to him before leaving. Looking at Kim Bao inside, he grits his teeth. Seeing them carrying a person in, he stands up in surprise. Jing Qin closed the door. Yushu is sweating. Although Xia Mingming is not heavy, it is hard to carry a living person who weighs 70 or 80 kilograms upstairs. Jing Qin puts the bamboo cage on the bed and obediently goes to close the door. Yushu and Yu Xiaoxiu put the smelly Xia Mingming on the bed. They turn their heads and take a few deep breaths before they feel better. Yushu bends down to pull the cloth off Xia Mingming's mouth. She reaches behind her to untie her. She pats her dry face and whispers, "Mingming, Mingming, wake up." Xia Mingming has been locked up for a long time. She feels hot and stuffy. Yushu pats her face red, but she doesn't wake up. Fortunately, she is still breathing. Unable to wake her up, Yushu wrings a wet towel and wipes the dirt on her face so that she can breathe more easily. When she is about to untie her clothes, she looks up and sees Yu Xiaoxiu and Jing Qin staring at her. She says with a straight face, "Turn around. Turn your head away." Yu Xiaoxiu turns around without hesitation. Jing Qin looks at Yushu with confusion and gestures, "What's wrong?" Looking at his innocent face, Yushu explains patiently, "This is a girl and you are a man. A girl's body can't be seen by a man. I'm going to take off her clothes. You can't see it." Jing Qin looks at her as if he understands. Yushu's face darkened. "You have to marry her after seeing her." Seeing that she was angry, Jing Qin tactfully turned around and did not question her any further. After a while he realized that something was amiss. Why could Xiaoyu watch if they could not? Wasn't Xiaoyu a man like them? Yushu unbuttoned Xia Mingming's shirt, leaving only the undergarment for her to breathe in. She grabbed the fan at the head of the bed and fanned Xia Mingming with all her might, calling her name incessantly. After a while, Xia Mingming's eyelids moved and slowly opened. When Yushu saw that she was awake, she fanned even harder and asked, "Mingming, how are you? Do you recognize who I am?" Yu Ashu. When Xia Mingming saw the moving faces in front of him, he knew that he was saved. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he raised his trembling hands and grabbed onto Yushu's sleeves tightly. "Yes, it's me. Don't cry, it's okay. You're safe now." Yushu saw that Xia Mingming recognized him and reached out to wipe away her tears. "Did Qiu Biao lock you in the wooden barrel?" "Qiu. Xia Mingming nodded with great effort. Her throat was so hoarse that she could barely make a sound. Yushu quickly poured a glass of water and helped her sit up. She then fed her a few mouthfuls of water. "Why did he lock you up? Do you know anything?" After drinking the water, Xia Mingming could speak again. She leaned in Yushu's arms and said weakly, I know the art of disguise. Yesterday morning I predicted that the cargo ship would be hijacked tonight. Many people would die, so I went to find Bai Qing. I wanted him to be prepared in advance. I met Qiu Biao downstairs, so I reminded him first. He said that he would bring me to see Bai Qing. He brought me to a place where no one was around and knocked me out." She finished her story intermittently. Yushu's mood was a little complicated. As she expected, Qiu Biao hid Xia Mingming. The boatman must have been instructed by him to lie about seeing Xia Mingming get off the ship. The reason why Qiu Biao did this must be because he was guilty. The hijacking that Xia Mingming predicted must have something to do with him. In other words, Qiu Biao was a traitor. But Xia Mingming not only knew the art of disguise, but also could predict in detail that the cargo ship would be hijacked tonight. Wasn't this too amazing? One must know that her law of time of calamity only predicted that Yu Xiaoxiu would be in a flood today. It was definitely not as accurate as Xia Mingming's prediction. What kind of calculation did she use? How did you predict it? Yu Shu could not help but ask an off-topic question. She was actually a little shocked that she had encountered a disguise technique that was even more powerful than her law of time of calamity. Xia Mingming looked hesitant, not knowing how to answer. Seeing her troubled expression, Yu Shu immediately knew that she had asked a stupid question. Powerful disguise techniques were usually not leaked. If it was anyone else who asked her about the law of time of calamity, she would definitely not tell them. Now was not the time to think about this. Since she knew that Qiu Biao was a traitor, she had to think of a way to subdue him and avoid this flood. Xia Mingming saw Yu Shu's expression change back and forth. Thinking that she did not believe her words, she anxiously grabbed her and said, "What I said is true. This cargo ship will be hijacked tonight and people will die. That Qiu Biao is not a good person. He must be in cahoots with the pirates. Believe me, I really predicted it." Seeing that she was agitated, Yu Shu comforted her. "And I believe you. Don't talk for now. Rest for a while. Come, drink another cup of water." Yu Shu poured another cup of water and slowly fed it to her. Her mind was filled with thoughts of how to avoid this disaster. She did not notice that Xia Mingming's gaze, other than gratitude, also had a strange look on her face. Putting down the cup of water, Yu Shu helped her lie down. Xia Mingming looked down and saw that her upper body was only left with a thin chest wrap. Her face instantly flushed red and she raised her hand to cover her chest. When Yu Shu saw this, she was afraid that this little girl would misunderstand that she was taking advantage of her. She quickly pulled the blanket over her and explained, "Don't misunderstand. I only took off your clothes to let you breathe. You have been stuck in the wooden tub for too long. If I don't do this, I'm afraid something will happen to you." Xia Mingming did not fall out with Yu Shu. She bit her lips. Her face, which had been wiped clean by Yu Shu, was now as red as a rose. You know. Know what? Oh. Yu Shu froze for a moment. She understood that Xia Mingming was referring to her female body. She found it funny in her heart. Xia Mingming didn't discover it when she saw her chest. She knew that she was a little girl the first day they met. Yes, I know. As soon as Yu Shu admitted it, Xia Mingming turned around and turned her back to her. Yu Shu had no time to guess what this little girl was thinking. Seeing that Xia Mingming was fine, she sat up from the bed and put down the mosquito net. She said to Jing Qin and Yu Xiaoxiu, who had been punished to stand for a long time, "Okay, you can go back." The two of them turned around. They consciously did not look at the bed. Their gazes fell on Yu Shu. Both of them had question marks on their faces. Yu Xiaoxiu pointed at the tea table and asked them to sit down. Since things had come to this, there was no need to hide it from them anymore. He told them everything in full detail. "You heard it just now. This caravan's guard captain, Qiu Biao, had bad intentions. He was obviously knocked unconscious and hidden in the wooden barrel. I went to find Uncle Bai earlier. He gathered everyone to the bow of the ship and gave me space to rescue Xia Mingming. We didn't let Qiu Biao find out. Uncle Bai will come to find us later and we can discuss countermeasures." As soon as he finished speaking, there was a knock on the door. Bai Qing's voice came from outside the door. "Ah Shu, it's me." "It's Uncle Bai," Yu Shu said to the two of them. She got up and opened the door. Bai Qing entered the room and asked, "How is it? Did you save him?" Yu Shu nodded and pointed at Xia Mingming, who was on the bed. "I saved him. Let's sit down and talk." Yu Shu repeated Xia Mingming's words to Bai Qing and verified the fact that Qiu Biao was a traitor. Bai Qing's face turned pale. It seemed that he was very angry. "Uncle Bai, what do you think we should do now?" Yu Shu pushed the problem to Bai Qing. She did not understand the river's affairs. She needed someone with experience to come up with ideas. Bai Qing turned to look at Yu Shu's bed. "Is young Master Xia awake?" Xia Mingming could not sleep and replied, "He's awake." Bai Qing said, "May I ask if young Master Xia is sure that there will be pirates coming to rob the ship tonight?" "It's fine if you don't believe me." Xia Mingming did not have a good temper with him like he did with Yu Shu. From his point of view, this dangerous trip was all because of Bai Qing's incompetence as a leader. Bai Qing said in a good tone, "Young Master Xia, do not misunderstand. I'm not doubting your words. Qiu Biao is obviously plotting something. I just want to confirm if they will act tonight." Xia Mingming did not say anything. Bai Qing looked to Yu Shu for help. Yu Shu said gently, "Mingming, talk to Uncle Bai." "Yes, it's tonight. Thank you, young Master Xia, for speaking up for justice." When this matter is over, I will return young Master Xia's travel expenses. I hope young Master Xia will not take offense. Bai Qing was not as perfunctory to Xia Mingming as before. It was also because she knew that Xia Mingming was a guest and could not be offended. Xia Mingming snorted and did not pay attention to her anymore. Bai Qing rubbed her forehead and thought for a while. She raised her head and said to Yu Shu, "To catch bandits we must first catch their leader. We do not know how many other traitors besides Qiu Biao are on this ship. We will first subdue him and then counter the others. According to the route, the ship will pass by Dunan Gorge at night. It is the easiest place to hide pirates and pirates. Qiu Biao must have colluded with outsiders to act there. We must first take him down before that, then change the course and avoid the pirates to go ashore." Yu Shu frowned. "I heard that Captain Qiu's martial arts are very high. He originally came from Tongyuan Escort Agency. The few of us may not be able to do anything to him." When Yu Shu said this, she looked at Jing Chen with pity. If this hero still had his martial arts, not to mention one Qiu Biao, even 10 of him would not be a problem. Bai Qing laughed. "Since we cannot defeat him by force, we will defeat him by wits. Qiu Biao loves to drink, especially osmanthus wine. There are a few jugs of 50-year-old osmanthus wine in this shipment. I will take them out to tempt him. I don't believe that he will not be greedy." "Get him drunk?" Yu Shu shook her head. "He still has things to do tonight, how can he drink so much?" "Don't let him drink too much. 1 cup is enough." Bai Qing said, "We merchants will secretly carry some knockout drugs when we travel. When the time comes, I will drug the wine and 1 cup will make him drunk." Yu Shu clapped her hands happily. "That will be great." Yu Xiaoxiu and Jing Chen listened to their discussion from the side. They could not interrupt. The difference was that the former could not interrupt and the latter could not. Chapter 131. After Bai Qing left, Yu Shu waited anxiously in the room, afraid that Bai Qing would fail. Qiu Biao found out. Xia Mingming cleaned herself up and changed into Yu Shu's clothes, but she still couldn't get rid of the rancid smell on her. She leaned against the headboard and looked at Yu Shu, who was restless, and Yu Xiaoxiu, who was in a daze. She turned her eyes to Jing Chen, who was sitting on the opposite bed without saying a word. She couldn't help complaining, "It's all because of this person. We are all unlucky because of him. We shouldn't have let him on board." Jing Chen and Yu Shu looked up at her at the same time. The former was puzzled while the latter was calm. She said, "Qiu Biao had evil intentions and planned it long ago. What does it have to do with him? If he didn't get on board, they wouldn't have hijacked the ship?" Xia Mingming pursed her lips and didn't argue with Yu Shu. She also knew that the hijacking had nothing to do with Jing Chen. She was just angry and had nowhere to vent, so she said those angry words. Yu Shu looked back at Jing Chen and felt suspicious. She had predicted that she and Yu Xiaoxiu would be in trouble, and she thought that Jing Chen was the cause of the disaster. But now it seemed that the hijacking had nothing to do with Jing Chen, the Bane, in terms of time. In this case, Jing Chen had been with them for so many days, but nothing bad happened to them. Compared with the disasters that happened after she met Jing Chen in Yang City, this peaceful phenomenon was very strange. Qin Zheng's master once said that the person who offended Kidu Star could only get rid of the Bane by finding the Bane. Thinking of this, Yu Shu's previous suspicion arose again. Jing Chen had found the Bane. Was it before or after the amnesia? If it was before the amnesia, there was no need to say more. If it was after the amnesia, didn't it mean that the Bane of Jing Chen was on this ship? Yu Shu's eyelids twitched. She looked around at the people in the room. She and Yu Xiaoxiu had met Jing Chen before, so they were excluded. Xia Mingming and Jing Chen didn't have much contact, so they were excluded. Besides them, the one who had the most relationship with Jing Chen on this ship should be Bai Qing. Jing Chen was rescued from the river because of Bai Qing. It was not wrong to say that Bai Qing was the one who destroyed Jing Chen's life. Mingming that morning. Yu Shu pointed at Jing Chen. Mingming was the first one who found him that morning? She still remembered that morning. She heard Xia Mingming scream. Then she got up and saw someone fishing Jing Chen out of the river. In this way, the one who had the most relationship with Jing Chen's rescue should be Xia Mingming. Xia Mingming didn't know why Yu Shu brought this up. She nodded reluctantly. Then she saw Yu Shu look at her strangely. "Ashu, what's wrong?" Yu Shu looked at her and then looked at Jing Chen. Her eyes wandered back and forth between the two. She laughed dryly. "No, nothing. The bane of Jing Chen was probably Xia Mingming. It's been so long. Uncle Bai hasn't come back yet. I'll go out and take a look." Yu Shu said. "I'll go with you," Yu Xiaoxiu said. Jing Chen also stood up. At this time the door rang. Hearing Bai Qing's voice, the room suddenly became quiet. Yushu went to open the door and saw Bai Qing standing outside in a hurry. Yushu quickly let him in and closed the door. Then she turned around and asked, "How is it? Is it done?" Bai Qing touched the sweat on her forehead. Her eyes were somewhat proud. She nodded. "It's done. He's in my room. I've tied him up and stuffed him under the bed." "That's great." Everyone in the room was happy. They all breathed a sigh of relief. Bai Qing didn't relax. She said cautiously, "Qiu Biao must have an accomplice on the boat. I'm not at ease with the people under him. I have to find a way to drag them out. When Qiu Biao wakes up, I'll interrogate him." Yushu had an idea. She said, "Do you remember the boatman who said he saw young Master Xia disembark last night? He must be Qiu Biao's subordinate. Capture him first. If Qiu Biao refuses to talk, we'll start with him." Bai Qing's eyes lit up. He said, "I almost forgot about this person. Good. I'll go find a few trustworthy subordinates and prepare to capture them. After we catch them all in one fell swoop, I'll ask the helmsman to turn around and dock at the next ferry. I'm telling you guys first. If a fight breaks out, you must be careful. It's best to stay in your room and not come out." Yushu nodded. "Okay. Uncle Bai, you be careful too." And Bai Qing turned around and left. As he walked to the door, he heard Yu Xiaoxiu's stomach growl. He turned around and saw the awkward expression on Yu Xiaoxiu's face. He laughed and said, "You haven't eaten lunch yet, right? I'll have someone send it up, so you don't have to go downstairs." Yu Xiaoxiu rubbed his head. "Thank you, Uncle Bai." Bai Qing turned around and went out the door. He closed the door behind him. Listening to Yushu's teasing words about Yu Xiaoxiu, the smile on his face instantly disappeared. He glanced back at the closed door and went downstairs. Not long after Bai Qing left, a boatman sent food over. The few of them had been hungry since morning. Xia Mingming had not eaten for a day and a night. Previously, she was worried about the disaster and had no appetite. But now that the situation was under her control, she was starving. Yushu thanked the boatman. She took the food from Yu Xiaoxiu and put it on the table. The food on the boat was very good. There were 4 dishes and 1 soup. There were meat and vegetables. There was also a large bowl of rice. Yushu handed a bowl to Xia Mingming, knowing that she was hungry. Smelling the fragrance of the food, Kim Bao, who was kept in a bamboo cage on the bed, made a few sounds. Yu Xiaoxiu got up and went to get it. As soon as he was released, Kim Bao rushed to the table. When it was about to jump into the soup bowl, Yushu quickly grabbed its tail and pulled it back. Kim Bao struggled in her hands and pitifully cried, "Shut up." Yushu was unmoved. She put it on the ground, picked up a piece of meat and threw it to it. Then she ignored it and sat down to eat. When she looked up, she saw Xia Mingming eating in a hurry. Fearing that she would choke, she put down her chopsticks and poured a bowl of soup for her. "Drink the soup first." Xia Mingming blushed. She picked up the soup bowl and embarrassedly turned her head to drink the soup. Compared to her, Jing Chen's leisurely movements when he ate were more pleasing to the eye. Ouch. Kim Bao had been shouting under the table since a while ago. Yu Xiaoxiu bit his chopsticks and bent down to look at it. He saw that it was grabbing the tablecloth and trying to climb up, looking naughty. He was afraid that Yushu would teach it a lesson if she saw it, so he put down the bowl and was about to take it down. Suddenly, he felt dizzy and fell forward with the chair on the ground. "Xiaoxiu." Yushu was shocked. She hurriedly got up to help him, but she heard a clang sound. The bowl in Xia Mingming's hand fell to the ground. His head fell forward and he fainted on the table. Jing Chen was stunned. He put down the bowl and stood up to look at Yushu. Mingming. The sudden turn of events and the scene in front of her caused Yushu to turn pale with fright. Just as a terrifying thought rose in her mind, she felt a wave of dizziness hit her. She swayed a few times and fell backwards. Jing Chen quickly grabbed her arm and pulled her into his embrace, stepping forward to support her. Jing Chen couldn't speak. He could only shake Yushu nervously and stared at her eyes that were closing more and more. Before Yushu lost consciousness, she looked at the swaying faces in front of her. Her lips gently opened and closed, in Bai Qing's room on the first floor. Qiu Biao put down the wine glass in his hand and said hatefully, "Damn it. These little rascals almost ruined our plan." Taking away the cup in his hand, Bai Qing coldly said, "You're the one who was careless and allowed others to get hold of your weakness. Fortunately, they trusted me and took the initiative to discuss it with me instead of revealing it. If Su Ming knew about it, our trip would have been in vain." Qiu Biao said gloomily, "How would I know that so many things would happen? First, someone predicted that we were going to rob the ship, and then someone came to catch the thief. If you ask me, you shouldn't have let them follow us. Otherwise there wouldn't be so much trouble. Bai Qing said, letting them follow us was a show for Su Ming. Otherwise, why would he be at ease to smuggle the goods in? The more idlers there are, the safer our caravan is. That batch of goods is more than half of Su Ming's wealth. This is a rare opportunity, we can't miss it. As he spoke, he looked at Qiu Biao resentfully. I saved that person from the river so that he would be the scapegoat in the end, so that we could return cleanly and not arouse suspicion. Who knew that you would throw him off the boat behind my back? Biao, we have known each other for so many years. When can you use your brain? 3 years ago when we did that job in Sichuan, you almost leaked the trap. You caused us to be in trouble for the past 3 years. You caused us to be afraid of being caught. Qiu Biao explained, I was afraid that he would die on the ship and be unlucky and ruin our plan. You didn't tell me in advance. All right, Bai Qing raised his hand and interrupted him. He stood up and said, come upstairs with me to take a look. They should have fallen into the trap. Qiu Biao followed behind him. The two of them went up to the cabin on the second floor. Seeing that there was no one in the corridor, Bai Qing took out a dagger from his sleeve and inserted it into the gap of the door. He pushed the door open and entered with Qiu Biao. He closed the door and turned around to look at the situation in the room with a sneer. Xia Mingming fainted on the table, Yu Xiaoxiu fell under the table, Yu Shu and Jing Chen leaned on each other and fell to the ground. All 4 of them were knocked out by the knockout drug in the food. Let's take a look, Bai Qing said cautiously. Waving his hand to wipe away the faint rancid smell in the room, Qiu Biao bent down and checked one by one. He opened their eyelids and turned to Bai Qing. What should we do with them? Tie them up and stuff them under the bed. When Ah San and the others come to rob the ship at night, we will throw them into the river to feed the fish. Chapter 132. Night fell and the moon rose above the river. The boat sailed on the river. Not far ahead was Husband's Pass. The surrounding cliffs gradually became steeper and the water flowed rapidly. The helmsman at the bow focused all his attention on the gorge in front of him. It was easy for the boat to deviate at night. The gorge was steep and the current was even faster. It was common for the boat to accidentally brush against the cliffs. Carefully sailing into the gorge, there was a turn in front of them. The wind grew louder and the boatmen working on the deck all grabbed onto the mast and ropes. A few experienced boatmen even took the opportunity to chat, talking about what they saw when they crossed the river. At that moment there was a sudden whistle from the bow. The alarm had only been sounded twice when the boat suddenly swayed and tilted without warning, crashing into the cliffs. The faces of the boatmen on the deck all changed. After a moment of panic, someone ran to the helm. The call grew louder and louder. The one who ran the fastest saw the helmsman killed by an arrow on the helm. He didn't even have time to scream before the arrow pierced through his chest. Blood splattered in front of his eyes. Having lost the helmsman, the boat crashed into the cliffs. The violent shaking caused many people running on the boat to tumble. 1 or 2 people who were close to the edge of the boat fell directly into the water. Screams rang out one after another on the boat. Then a nimble bandit boat approached them in the night. Iron chains were thrown onto the boat, and figures stepped on the chains and jumped onto the merchant boat. Ah! Someone hijacked the boat. The water bandits are here. The water bandits are here. In the midst of the hubbub, Yu Shu struggled to wake up. When she opened her eyes, it was dark in front of her. There was no light in the room, only a little light shining through the window. Lying in the narrow space, her hands and feet were tied, and her mouth was gagged with a cloth. Her head was still a little dizzy. She shook her head, trying to see the scene in front of her clearly. Someone lightly bumped her shoulder. She turned her head and saw a pair of eyes that were still slightly bright in the night. Her mind instantly woke up. Woo-woo. Seeing that Yu Shu had woken up, Jing Chen's eyes lit up with joy. Unable to make a sound, he bumped her with his shoulder again as a response. Yu Shu soon discovered that they were now under the bed. She was lying on one side of the bed while Jing Chen was lying on the outside. His hands and feet were tied up and he couldn't move. She nudged Jing Chen with her head, signaling him to go out first. Jing Chen understood and moved out, while Yu Shu directly turned around and rolled out. With the help of Jing Chen, Yu Shu stood up from the ground and hopped to the opposite bed. She looked down and saw that Yu Xiaoxiu and Xia Mingming were both lying on the bed, unconscious. Damn it! Yu Shu cursed fiercely in her heart and wished that she could slap herself. She had taken everything into account, but she didn't expect that Bai Qing and that Qiu Biao were actually in cahoots. She thought she was smart enough to discuss with Bai Qing how to deal with Qiu Biao. Instead, she was drugged by them and became a turtle in a jar. There was no time to blame herself too much. The noise outside made Yu Shu realize that time was running out. If they didn't find a way to get out, they would all die. Bai Qing and Xiu Biao spent so much effort to put on a show. They planned to return to the Chamber of Commerce as victims afterward. She had seen through Xiu Biao and Bai Qing's true colors. Bai Qing would definitely not let them live. Woo-woo. With her hands tied, Yu Shu motioned Jing Chen to sit on the bed and turned her back to him. She pulled off the cloth on his mouth with her fingers and made a demonstration, asking him to pull off the cloth on her mouth. Yu Shu jumped back to her bedside and turned around to take out a dagger from under the mattress. This was a dagger Pei Jing had given her when she left Yang City for self-defense. She didn't expect that it would really come in handy. She used the dagger to grind her wrist a few times. It was not smooth, so Yu Shu called out to Jing Chen in a low voice, "Jing Chen, come here. I'll untie you first." After struggling for a while, the two of them untied each other's hands and feet. Yu Shu instructed Jing Chen to drag Yu Xiaoxiu and Xia Mingming out from under the bed and untied them. "Xiaoxiu, Mingming, wake up, wake up." Yu Shu patted their faces, but she couldn't wake them up. Hearing the sounds of fighting downstairs getting louder and louder, she was afraid that someone would rush upstairs to finish them off. She was burning with anxiety and thought of the plot she had seen on television before. She grabbed the kettle on the table and poured water on their faces. Cough, cough. This method worked. Xia Mingming and Yu Xiaoxiu woke up one after another. Yu Shu didn't have time to comfort them and hurriedly said, "Wake up, the hijackers are coming. We have to run." As she spoke, she crept back to the bed and stuffed the important items into a waterproof leather bag. She fastened the bag and hung it around her neck. She grabbed the ancient sword under the pillow and pulled off the cloth wrapping it, revealing the sword. It didn't matter if it was sharp or not, it was still a weapon. After quickly packing up, Yu Shu rushed to the window and opened it. She looked down and was immediately shocked. Under the moonlight, she saw shadows of people moving around, swords and sabers gleaming. Corpses of the shipwrights were strewn across the deck. The sound of sharp weapons piercing into flesh resounded, and the river wind carried the stench of blood into her face. Suppressing the acid in her stomach, Yu Shu turned around and stuffed the dagger into Jing Chen's hand. She nudged the still stunned Xia Mingming and pulled Yu Xiaoxiu tightly. She urged them, "Jing Chen, look after Mingming and follow me closely." Yu Shu walked to the door and gently opened it a crack. She looked outside and heard people screaming and running in the corridor. The lights had long been out, so she couldn't see who was who. Chirp, chirp. An ear-piercing chirp awakened Yu Xiaoxiu's attention. He looked down and found Goldie, who had unknowingly run to the edge of his trousers. He quickly bent down to pick it up and stuffed it into his clothes. "Let's go." Yu Shu dragged Yu Xiaoxiu out and ran in the direction of the rear cabin. When she was looking for Xia Mingming on the bed yesterday, she had checked the inside and outside of the merchant ship. Aside from the cargo room, she was very clear about the structure of the ship. There was a window in the rear cabin, and they could jump to the roof of the first floor. It wasn't too high from the deck and it was much safer than taking the stairs. The four of them ran to the end of the corridor and found the window. Yu Shu opened the window and looked down. Seeing that there was no one below, she jumped down first. This floor wasn't high and the four of them successfully jumped out. Further down was the deck. From Yu Shu's estimation, this floor was about 2 meters high. She grabbed the sword in her hand and jumped down first. When she landed, her entire calf was numb. She rubbed her ankle and stood up. She looked up at the three people on the roof and said, "All of you jump down quick." Yu Xiaoxiu and Jing Chen jumped down without saying a word. However, Xia Mingming stood on the roof and didn't dare to move. Jing Chen landed firmly on the ground. Yu Shu pulled Yu Xiaoxiu up. Seeing her dawdling and hearing the sounds of fighting coming closer, she anxiously reached out to her and coaxed, "Mingming, quickly jump down. Don't be afraid, I'll catch you." Xia Mingming made up her mind. She squeezed her eyes and jumped down. Yu Shu reached out to catch her, but she was knocked back by Xia Mingming. She didn't fall down because of Jing Chen's support. Xia Mingming leaned against Yu Shu's chest and felt soft. She raised her head and looked at Yu Shu's calm face under the moonlight. She was embarrassed and didn't notice that Yu Shu's chest was pushed away by Yu Shu. "There are people over there." A shout was heard. Yu Shu heard footsteps on the deck. She turned around and saw 2 figures running towards the stern of the ship. They even cut down 2 boatmen on the way. Ah! Xia Mingming also saw the blood and screamed. She trembled and hugged Yu Shu's arm, hiding behind her. Yu Shu didn't have the time to comfort her. She quickly looked around and pushed her with one hand and grabbed Yu Xiaoxiu with the other. They ran towards the stern of the ship. Jing Chen followed closely behind them, occasionally turning his head to look at the people chasing them. "Asan, kill them. Don't let them get away." An angry roar came from the window on the second floor. Yushu rushed to the stern of the ship and took advantage of the chaos to look back. She saw a figure lying on the window of the rear cabin where they had jumped down from. That voice was a little familiar. Was Bai Qing. Yushu's eyes flashed, and her expression changed drastically. She saw a pirate wielding a long sword and emitting a bloody aura rushing towards them. He came with a menacing aura. Just a dozen steps away, he raised his hand and cut off the head of a shipwright who was lying on the ground. Blood splattered everywhere. "Jump down. Swim to the shore," Yushu shouted. She pushed the pale-faced Yu Xiaoxiu to the edge of the ship and pushed him down. Plop. Yu Xiaoxiu fell into the river, splashing water all over the surface of the pill layer. Xia Mingming's legs went soft. She flipped twice but couldn't get over. She sat on the ground. Yushu climbed halfway and was about to jump down when she saw Xia Mingming sit down. Hesitation flashed in her eyes. She gritted her teeth and pulled back her legs. She pulled Xia Mingming up from the ground and slapped her face. "Jump down if you don't want to die. Swim to the shore for me." Bang bang. Xia Mingming woke up a little from the slap. She bit her lips and climbed back to the edge of the ship. She was pushed down by Yushu by the leg. There was another splash. At this time, Yushu didn't even dare to turn her head. She was afraid that if she turned her head, her neck would be chopped off. She heard footsteps behind her. The smell of blood in the air thickened. A strong sense of danger assaulted her. The cold wind blew past her ears. She instinctively shrunk her neck and rolled to the side. She bumped into Jing Chen and the two of them rolled into a ball. Jing Chen subconsciously reached out to protect Yushu's head. The two of them rolled twice before stopping. Yushu happened to be under his body. When she opened her eyes, she saw a shining long sword on Jing Chen's shoulder. It was stabbing towards Jing Chen's back. This one move would pierce through the two of them. Her heart stopped for a moment. Her eyes widened in horror. Her throat rolled and she shouted two words, "Dust storm." His ears twitched. Jing Chen, who was lying on top of Yushu, instantly tightened his muscles. His pupils contracted. He clenched his fingers and tightly grabbed Yushu's wrist that was holding the sword. As fast as lightning, his arm bent at an extremely twisted angle. Ding! Bang! The sound of blades colliding was ear-piercing. Yushu widened her eyes and stared at the top of her head in a trance. Jing Chen's hand, which was tightly grasped by Jing Chen, was holding up the prehistoric sword, covered in green embroidery and firmly holding the sword that was dripping with blood above her head. Bang! Chapter 133. Clang clang. The weapons clashed and the sound of weapons clashing echoed in Yushu's ears. In the next moment she felt her wrist, which was being held by Jing Chen, heat up. With a violent jolt, she saw that the fiendish pirate leader was jolted away by an invisible force. The long sword in his hand fell from his hand, and his entire body fell miserably. Asan. Bai Qing, who was at the rear window, saw this scene and his expression changed. Jing Chen held Yushu and rolled twice on the ground, crashing into the wall of the ship. This time, it was Yushu who was lying on top of him. She crawled up in shock and knelt on the ground. Turning her head to look at the unconscious pirate on the ground, she turned back to grab Jing Chen with joy and said, "You remember? That's great. If Jing Chen's martial arts recovered, then what did they have to be afraid of?" Jing Chen propped his upper body up and sat up, holding Yushu's hand. Raising his head, half his face was covered by his hair that had been blown about by the wind. His dark pupils reflected Yushu's safe and sound figure, and the sharpness in his eyes disappeared in an instant. Then he became docile again. He shook his head at Yushu and his lips moved. Dark red blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Seeing this, Yushu's heart sank. The joy of escaping from death was instantly washed away. She raised her hand in a flurry to wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth, but the more she wiped, the more blood there was. It dyed his chin red and dripped onto his chest. "There's still someone over there." Shouts suddenly came from the ship, making Yushu suddenly realize that they were not out of danger. She hurriedly pulled Jing Chen up from the ground and turned to look at the black figure running towards them from the corner of the cabin. She sheathed the ancient sword that had fallen to the ground on the back of her belt, and pushed Jing Chen onto the edge of the ship. She hurriedly said, Jing Chen, jump down quick." Jing Chen climbed onto the edge of the ship but did not let go. He pulled Yushu up with him and wrapped his arm around her waist as they fell into the surging river. The angry shouts of the pirates were immediately drowned out by the sound of splashing water. "Damn it! Bai Qing slammed his palm on the window, and stared angrily at the disappearing figures at the back of the ship. Qiu Biao was standing behind him. He saw the scene and said through gritted teeth, "Do they think they can escape? Jumping off the ship at the mouth of the gorge means death. They just live a little longer." Bai Qing's face was gloomy and he said, "Go find some people who are good swimmers and search for them. We cannot leave anyone alive." The current at the mouth of the gorge was rapid, and Yu Shu desperately swam her limbs. She did not know how many mouthfuls of water she had drunk. She swam towards the opposite shore from the cargo ship and pirate ship, and at the same time she turned her head, searching for Yu Xiaoxiu's figure on the dark blue river. She did not dare to shout for fear of being discovered by the pirates. Bai Qing would not let them go so easily, and would definitely send people into the water to chase after them. The river was very cold. She was glad that it was summer, and even more glad that there was someone with her at this time. Yu Shu turned her head to look at Jing Qin, who was swimming beside her. Before jumping off the ship, she had thought that if Jing Qin did not know how to swim, she would drag him ashore even if she had to. Now it seemed that she had thought too much. Jing Qin had forgotten everything, but his instincts were still there. Just like that frightening sword block just now, if it was not for his sudden display of power, they would both have lost their lives on the ship. On both sides of the gorge there were steep cliffs and shallow shoals. Yu Shu slowly approached the river with Jing Qin. Because she could not find Yu Xiaoxiu, she was burning with anxiety. She heard a short, strange sound in the wind. She keenly caught this sound and delightedly stepped on the water. She turned her head to look, and her hand, which was moving on the water, was pulled by Jing Qin. She turned her head and saw that Jing Qin was pointing in a direction. She looked in that direction and saw a small black shadow floating on the shoal not far away. The strange sound mixed with the sound of the wind came from there. "It's Xiaoxiu, let's go there quickly." Yu Shu pushed Jing Chen's shoulder, and the two swam in that direction. The water was getting shallower and slowly reached their waist. Yu Shu staggered out of the water, dripping wet, and ran towards the two black shadows. Jing Chen also stood up from the water, clutching his abdomen, and slowly followed her. That small black shadow was indeed Yu Xiaoxiu. He fainted in the shallow water and Kim Bao stood on his chest. His light yellow fur clung to his body, making him look bald and looked very funny. He jumped towards Yu Shu. "Gigi Gigi. Xiaoxiu Xiaoxiu." Yu Shu ran over and helped Yu Xiaoxiu up. She touched his chest, felt his heartbeat and felt relieved. She turned around and looked and saw Xia Mingming's unconscious figure not far away. "Gigi." Kim Bao jumped up and down, trying to get Yu Shu's attention. Yu Shu reached out and pressed its head and praised it with a low smile. "Good job, Kim Bao." Yu Shu handed Yu Xiaoxiu to Jing Qin to support him, and ran to Xia Mingming's side. She bent down to check. Fortunately he was still alive, but he fainted just like Yu Xiaoxiu. She looked around the environment. The shallow water was not big and there was a piece of rock behind it. Behind the rock there was no light in the dark forest. She looked at the river, and the two boats stopped under the mountain wall on the opposite bank, huddled together. The fire on the boats was jumping, and it seemed that they could smell the blood in the wind. "We can't stay here." Yu Shu wiped the water on her face and looked at Xia Mingming in her arms. After a moment of hesitation, she struggled to pull him up from the ground and carried him on her back. She walked towards Jing Qin. Jing Qin supported Yu Xiaoxiu and raised his head to look at her. Yu Shu's gaze swept past his scarlet lips, and she knew that his injuries were not light. She turned her head to look at Xia Mingming, who was on her back, and steeled her heart. She pointed to the forest behind them and said, "Jing Qin, you carry Xiaoxiu and I'll carry Mingming. We have to escape into the forest and find a place to hide." Jing Qin nodded, pressed his palm on his dry abdomen, and bent down to carry Yu Xiaoxiu. He staggered and stood firm. Yu Shu pursed her lips and looked at him. She reached out to grab Kim Bao, who had climbed onto her, to untie her legs and put him on her shoulder. She supported Xia Mingming on her back and staggered forward behind the pile of rocks. Not long after they left, several bandits wearing fish-skin diving suits came up from the shallow water. They searched around but did not see anyone, so they gathered together and asked, "Did you find it?" "No. There's nothing there either. Do you want to search the forest?" "No need. It should have sunk into the river. Let's go back and report. It's not easy to do such a big job, so we should go back to the stockade to celebrate. Brothers, let's go." Yu Shu and Jing Qin walked in the dark for half an hour in the forest before they found a cave under a mountain wall that they could hide in. There was no smell of animal urine inside. "Come in quickly." Yu Shu and Jing Qin walked in one after the other. They put Yu Xiaoxiu and Xia Mingming down. Kim Bao jumped down from Yushu's shoulder and rolled on the ground. It was very dark in the cave, so they could only see vague figures. Jingchen, you stay here. I'll go out and pick up some branches to make a fire. She got up and was about to go out, but Jingchen grabbed her arm and stood in front of her, not letting her go out. She asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" His expression could not be seen clearly and he could not make a sound. Yushu was worried that she did not know what he meant, but she felt her hand being pulled by him. She opened her palm and carefully felt the strokes on his hand. "Oh, I'll go. You're here." The silent words were very soft, and Yushu's heart warmed. She followed his arm to his wet shoulder and pressed him down to sit down. She coaxed, "Don't worry, I'll be outside. I won't go far." Jingchen wanted to stand up, but as soon as he moved, he fell back down. He pressed his wet abdomen and watched Yushu come out of the cave. He helplessly leaned against the stone wall and wiped the taste of blood from the corner of his mouth. He slightly gasped for breath. The pain came wave after wave and his vision became darker. He opened his mouth wanting to make a sound, but he could not even make a sound. Yushu was outside the cave. She picked up some branches and leaves and carried them back into the cave. She took off the leather bag around her neck and rummaged through it for a while. She happily fished out 2 flints. She bought them in a small town by the river when the merchant ship first docked, and spent 5 copper coins. She also learned how to light a fire from the villagers. When she was escaping, she did not forget to pack them up. The flints were not afraid of moisture. Yushu rubbed them a few times and sparks appeared. She spent some effort to light the fire and the cave was instantly lit up. She excitedly raised her head and said to Jingchen sitting opposite her, "Jingchen, look after the fire. I'll go out and pick some hay." Jingchen sat there motionless and hung his head. His loose hair hung wet on his chest. Under the weak light of the fire, the back of his hand, which was pressed against his abdomen, was glaring to the eye. Yushu was stunned and crawled closer to him. She reached out her hand to take away his withered hand, and what came into view was his abdomen that was dyed deep red. Her eyes became hot and she fiercely shivered. She could not help but raise her hand to slap herself. She did not know that he was so heavily injured, and that he still had to carry Xiaoxiu for such a long distance. This fool, he did not cry out in pain because he did not know how to speak. Yushu supported Jingchen to lie down and unbuttoned his shirt. Seeing the long wound on his abdomen, her heart trembled. She frantically rummaged through the leather bag, and found a small bottle of medicinal powder. She did not care what was inside and sprinkled it on the wound. Only then did the bleeding stop a little. Looking around, she could not find anything to bandage the wound. She touched her body and her face turned slightly red. She reached into her clothes and unwrapped the cloth around her chest, and roasted it over the fire for a while. Then she tore it off and used it as a gauze and tied it over the wound. Fortunately, Jingchen's waist was thin enough, and after 3 or 4 rounds the bleeding stopped. After doing this, Yushu was already sweating, but she could not rest. She went out to pick up some dry branches and leaves to make the fire bigger. She moved Yu Xiaoxiu and Xia Mingming to the side of the fire. While they were all unconscious, she took off their wet clothes and hung them over the fire to dry. Kim Bao was lying by the fire, lazily looking up at the naked Yushu, and opened its mouth to yawn. When Yushu saw it, she reached out and poked its forehead and scolded it in a low voice, "Turn around, don't look." No one knew if Kim Bao understood or if he was afraid of the evil power of Yushu, but he twisted his butt and lied in another direction. Chapter 134. After dawn, Yu Xiaoxiu and Xia Mingming woke up one after another. Only Jingchen was still unconscious and had a fever. Yushu roughly told them the truth about Bai Qing and Qiu Biao robbing the merchant ship. Without giving them time to calm down, she assigned tasks to them. Xia Mingming stayed in the cave to look after Jingchen, while she and Yu Xiaoxiu went out to look for food. After listening to Yushu's arrangement, Xia Mingming said unhappily, "I want to go with you." Yushu was depressed because of Jingchen's injury, so she didn't treat her well. "What are you going to do? Do you know how to climb trees? Do you know how to catch fish? Just stay here and look after Jingchen." Xia Mingming glanced at Jingchen, who was lying on the ground with his coat covered. She curled her lips and said, "He's a girl. Why do you want me to stay with him? Anyway, he's unconscious and won't run around. Let him stay here alone." Hearing this, Yushu's face suddenly showed a stern expression. She said coldly, "If you don't want to stay here, then get out of here." Xia Mingming's eyes widened. She couldn't believe that Yushu would speak to her like this. Yu Xiaoxiu was also surprised. His sister rarely spoke with a straight face. Usually she would smile mischievously. Along the way she had been nice to Xia Mingming. Why did she suddenly turn hostile? Xia Mingming was a little willful, but fortunately she knew how to read people's expressions. Seeing that Yu Shu was really angry, she suppressed her grievances and stomped her feet. She gritted her teeth and said to Yu Shu, I'll look after him, okay? Yu Shu snorted coldly. She picked up the empty leather bag on the ground and hung the ancient sword on it. Then she dragged Yu Xiaoxiu away. Kim Bao wagged his tail and followed. Xia Mingming angrily sat on the ground. She picked up a tree branch and poked the ground. With a slight cry she cursed, "Smelly Ashu, bad Ashu, idiot fool." Yu Xiaoxiu had lived a hard life since childhood. Climbing trees to fish for bird eggs was nothing to her. Yu Shu found a few pomegranate trees in the forest. She plucked some and placed them in Yu Xiaoxiu's coat. Then she carried it on her back. Then she found a small stream in the forest. The two drank a few mouthfuls and washed their faces. Then they took a leather bag and filled it with clean water. Yu Shu originally wanted to catch a fish and roast it. But when it came down to it, she realized it wasn't so easy. There were fish in the stream, but each one was more slippery than the last. The siblings busied themselves for half a day but couldn't catch a single one. They could only pack up and go back. When Xia Mingming saw them return, she didn't say a word and angrily scratched the ground with a tree branch. Yu Shu ignored her and gave the flint to Yu Xiaoxiu to start a fire. She helped Jing Chen up and let him rest on her lap. Then she used the leather bag to feed him water. After that, she broke open the pomegranate and washed her fingers. She pinched the pomegranates one by one and dripped them into his mouth. Then she placed her other hand on his burning forehead, wanting him to feel better. Xia Mingming stole a glance at her and saw how attentively she took care of Jing Chen. Thinking of how Yu Shu scolded her because of Jing Chen, she felt upset. She couldn't help but ask, "Why are you so good to him?" Xia Mingming didn't know that Yu Shu and Jing Chen knew each other before. She only thought that he was a passerby who was fished out of the river. He didn't even know her and Yu Shu for a long time. Yu Shu broke the pomegranate seed and said without raising her head, "If you have nothing to do, go gather firewood." Xia Mingming broke the tree branch in her hand and stood up to leave. When Yu Xiaoxiu saw her leave, he whispered to Yu Shu, "Sis, what should we do with our nose?" "Leave this place and find a way to the capital." "We're still going to the capital?" "Why not?" Yu Shu asked. Yu Xiaoxiu said with a righteous face, "Uncle Bai, Boss Bai and Captain Xiu are bad guys. They killed so many people. Mr. Pei and the others don't even know about it. Shouldn't we go back and expose them?" Yu Shu shook her head and smiled. She raised her head to look at him and lectured, "My silly brother, do you think that right and wrong can be explained with just a few words? We have neither power nor influence, so how can we expose them? That Bai Qing is the younger brother of another deputy manager of Taiheng Commerce. His big brother might be aware of all the bad things he has done. Who knows if there are other people mixed in here? The few of us being able to escape is already very lucky. If we deliver ourselves to their doorstep, won't we just be asking to be silenced?" Yu Xiaoxiu was dumbfounded. Then we let them get away with it?" Yu Shu said expressionlessly, "They will get what they deserve." She had predicted this calamity beforehand, but she still couldn't avoid it. Now that things had come to this, she had to flee in a sorry state, causing Jing Chen to be injured. The reason for this was that her greatest mistake was that she only cared about calculating the calamity, but didn't accurately calculate people's hearts. On this point, Bai Qing had taught her a solid lesson. He let her know what it meant to know a person's heart. Bai Qing had done a good job on the surface. She had never suspected anything wrong with him. Now that she thought about it, it was all because of her first impression. Bai Qing was polite to her, so she thought he was kind. Bai Qing saved Jing Chen, so she thought he was a good person. Bai Qing quarreled with Qiu Biao several times, so she thought they were not on good terms. She wanted to use Bai Qing to deal with Qiu Biao, but in the end she got herself into trouble. Before this, she always thought that she could avoid the disaster by controlling the time of the disaster. Now it seemed that she thought too simply. Qing Zheng and Shi Wen's words were right. Disaster could be avoided but not eliminated. If there was one less disaster today, who knows if there would be a retribution in the future. This time she wanted to get rid of the disaster instead of avoiding it. That was why she suffered such a big loss. If she found out about Qiu Biao's conspiracy, she decisively chose to avoid it. If he had decisively chosen to avoid him instead of stubbornly staying behind to deal with him, he would be in a different situation now. She thought too highly of herself and the result was a terrible fall. She should lower herself and look up to see what she was going to face. However, it was not for nothing. At least she was able to reunite with Jing Chen. Otherwise, with his silly look, if he fell into other people's hands, it would be hard for her to be at ease. Yushu lowered her head and stroked Jing Chen's messy hair. She gradually revealed a bitter smile. She could now be sure that Jing Chen had not met the person who destroyed his life. This time, the disaster of the hijacking had nothing to do with him. However, this did not mean that he did not destroy others. The first person to bear the brunt should be Xia Mingming. Although she did not want to admit that it was Jing Chen's Kata star that caused mischief, the matter was clear. After Jing Chen boarded the ship, Xia Mingming calculated that the merchant ship was robbed. He looked for Bai Qing but was knocked out by Qiu Biao. He was placed in a wooden barrel with rancid water and almost suffocated to death. From this, it could be seen that not only was Xia Mingming not the person who destroyed Jing Chen's life, he was also the one who was affected the most by Jing Chen this time. Next, it would be her and Yu Xiaoxiu. If they did not jump off the ship at the last moment to escape, what awaited them would be death. Yushu's eyes darkened. Looking at Jing Chen's sleeping face, she felt very complicated. On one hand, she treated Jing Chen as a friend and could not bear to leave him. On the other hand, she clearly knew his fate and was really worried. Emotionally, she really could not bear to leave him in this situation. But rationally, for safety's sake, she should choose to stay away from him. She was not alone. She still had Xiaoxiu to take care of. Thinking back, when Jing Chen told her the secret of him destroying the Kata star in Yang City, she still boasted shamelessly that she did not care. It was really ridiculous. How could she know what kind of fate Jing Chen was carrying? The closer he was to someone, the more he would harm that person. He did not do anything wrong, but he had to bear the blame. He was so innocent, but he could not do anything about it. How sad it was. Thinking of that in the alley at dusk, Jing Chen faintly said to her, "This is goodbye." Yushu's chest felt stuffy. She thought that perhaps amnesia was a good thing for Jing Chen. Yushu's eyes became bright again. She said that she would protect him. How could she go back on her words? At least before he remembered everything, she would not leave him alone. If he was unlucky, then so be it. She had the ability to judge disasters. At worst, she would calculate a few more times every day. She looked at him carefully. Xia Mingming came back from picking up branches outside and found that Yushu's mood had improved. This was reflected in a simple address. "Mingming, the things you picked up are not firewood, they are called tree sticks." Although it was a mockery, it sounded much more pleasing to the ear. Xia Mingming put the things in his hands on the ground and said, "Aren't they all wood? What's the difference?" "Then you and I both have the same nose and two eyes, so there's no difference between the two of us?" Xia Mingming said confidently, "Of course there's a difference between the two of us. I'm a girl and you're a man." Yushu was wrapping mud on the bird's egg. When she heard this, she almost crushed the egg. She raised her head and looked at the little girl in front of her with a strange expression. She thought to herself, "This silly girl still doesn't know that I'm a girl." Yu Xiaoxiu snickered at the side and fed the pomegranate to Kim Bao. Xia Mingming was embarrassed by Yushu's stare. He lowered his head and whispered, "Why are you looking at me like that?" Yushu casually said, "Because you're pretty." Xia Mingming blushed and said in a low voice, "Flirting?" Yushu chuckled and didn't deny it. Instead she asked, "By the way, Mingming, you're so good at disguising. Can you tell me when we'll arrive at the capital?" She was very interested in Xia Mingming's disguising skills. She couldn't be rude when they were on the ship, but now that this girl's life was saved by her, there was no harm in asking about it. This. Xia Mingming looked troubled. Under Yushu's expectant gaze she said, I don't have anything for divination. I don't have a divination item, so I can't calculate anything." With one look, Yushu knew that she was lying. She looked at Xia Mingming meaningfully and suddenly said, "If you can't do it, then I'll do it." Hearing Yushu's words, Xia Mingming burst into laughter, thinking that she was joking. Not everyone could do divination. Yushu stuffed the bird egg into the fire pit and went out to wash her hands. When she came back, she picked up 3 copper coins from the pile of miscellaneous items on the ground and rubbed them in her palm. She calmed down and asked for a divination before throwing them down. Xia Mingming looked at her carefully and asked suspiciously, "What are you doing?" Yushu pointed at the copper coins on the ground. "Don't you recognize it? This is the 6 lines divination. Dan." Yushu tossed the copper coins in her hand and chanted, "Throwing heaven and earth, overturning yin and yang." When Xia Mingming heard these 2 lines, her eyes suddenly lit up and she sat up from the ground. You know the 6 lines divination?" "I do," Yushu said resolutely. From the first day she met Xia Mingming, she could tell that she was very interested in the 6 lines divination technique. Chapter 135. Yu Shu showed her hand in front of Xia Mingming. She originally wanted to get information from her, but she didn't expect Xia Mingming to ask her to teach her. She really dared to say anything. Yu Shu looked at Xia Mingming with a smile that wasn't a smile and said, "Why should I teach you?" Hearing this teasing, Xia Mingming knew her request was too much. She opened her mouth and after a while she said, I will give you money, okay? Yu Shu said, "Your luggage has already been searched by Qiu Biao. Do you have money on you?" Xia Mingming's face froze. She really didn't have a single copper coin on her. I will owe you first, okay? Yu Shu burst out laughing. She raised her hand and pulled her sleeve back from her hand. She waved her hand and said, "Then we will talk about it when you have money." This was clearly a refusal. Xia Mingming said, I really want to learn the 6 lines. Ashu, teach me. I promise I won't tell anyone. How about I write you an IOU? No matter how much money you want, I will give it to you in the future. Seeing her persistent attitude, Yu Shu suddenly became suspicious. She could understand that people would be tempted by the superior art of disguise. But Xia Mingming's behavior was not only tempted, but also eager. "First tell me, why do you want to learn the 6 lines? Yu Shu's question was a little tricky. Apart from those who already knew the art, there was no one who didn't want to learn it. This question was like asking, "Why do you want to eat?" The answer was obvious. But when Xia Mingming heard this question, she hesitated. Yu Shu suddenly understood. It seemed that the 6 lines had a more important meaning to Xia Mingming. So much so that she was thick-skinned enough to make such an excessive request. This was easy. The more she wanted it, the easier it would be for her to control her. "It's not that I can't teach you." This sentence made Xia Mingming's face light up. Yu Shu kept her in suspense, "But this art of disguise is passed down by my master. I definitely can't teach it to someone who doesn't know anything. First tell me, where did you come from?" She had always been curious about Xia Mingming's background. She didn't ask much before because there was no need. But now that they were going to the capital together, she couldn't keep an unknown person and take care of her. When Xia Mingming heard Yu Shu's question, she revealed a difficult expression. Yu Shu didn't give her time to think. "It's fine if you don't want to say it. It's not that I can teach it to outsiders. Anyway, I can't teach it to outsiders. It's not that I don't want to say of it." Xia Mingming lowered her and said, "Xia Mingming doesn't want to of me. Xia xtxt want to say of e of Xia of Ming Shui." This time, Xia Mingming answered straightforwardly, "I want to participate in the Grand Yen examination. Every 3 years, the capital would hold a Grand Yen examination. It was the best way for the world's traders to rise to the upper class and become famous overnight. This year was the 3rd year." Yu Shu asked suspiciously, "Isn't the Grand Yen examination in the 12th month? Why are you going to the capital so early?" "What? Don't you know?" Xia Mingming looked at Yu Shu strangely. "In every year where the Grand Yen examination is held, the masters of Yishui will appear in the capital every August. Any trader who wants to take a look will visit them and ask for advice. This is a rare opportunity. Of course I have to go early." Yu Shu knew she asked a silly question. She rubbed her nose and changed the topic. "You're so good at Yishui. I'm sure you'll be able to pass." This compliment sounded like sarcasm to Xia Mingming. She laughed at herself. "What's so good about me?" Yu Shu glared at her. "You can even predict the time of the cargo ship's disaster. Isn't that good enough?" Xia Mingming shook her head with a bitter expression. Yu Shu saw something wrong with her expression and used her elbow to nudge her. "What's wrong?" "I didn't predict it." Yu Shu laughed in spite of herself and said, "If it's not calculated, then how could it be imagined out of nowhere?" Xia Mingming bit her lip and hesitated for a moment before softly saying, I dreamed it." Yu Shu rolled her eyes and changed into a, "Who are you trying to fool?" expression. Xia Mingming saw that she did not believe her and angrily said, "I really dreamed it. The night before the ship's disaster, I dreamed that we would encounter water bandits the next night. Many people died. You, me and Xiaoxiu. I dreamed that we all died. That's why I went to Bai Qing and asked him to go ashore." Yu Shu saw that she did not seem to be lying and was shocked. She asked without batting an eyelid, "How can you be sure that what you dreamed will happen? What if it is just a normal dream?" Lu Mingming said at the same time, "I can be sure." Yu Shu said with an exaggerated expression, "Then you still say that you are not powerful? You can know whether it is a blessing or a curse. Isn't this prophecy? Interesting." Qing Zheng's master had told her before that there were very few talented people in this world who were born with abilities that others couldn't learn. She didn't expect that she would meet one so soon. It was really infuriating to compare oneself with others. Prophecy? If I have that kind of ability, I don't need to. Xia Mingming hugged her knees and laughed at herself. Do you think that everything in my dream will happen? Let me tell you, my dream will only come true if someone dies in my dream. Yushu was stunned. She digested Xia Mingming's words and was stunned. If what she said was true, then Xia Mingming had the ability to determine life and death? An idea flashed through her mind. She thought of something and was about to think about it carefully when she heard a choking sound. She raised her head and saw that Xia Mingming was crying with tears in her eyes. Yu Xiaoxiu, who had been eavesdropping on their conversation, also raised his head and looked at Xia Mingming, who was crying at the drop of a hat. Hey, what's wrong? Why are you crying out of nowhere? Yushu reached out to pat her but found that her hand was covered in mud. She could only retract her hand and soften her voice. Isn't it good that you have this ability? What's good about it? Xia Mingming shouted at Yushu and cried with red eyes. I often dream that people I don't know will die. It is not an empty dream. They will really die. They will really die. Do you know that? I don't know who they are and where they are. I can't tell them. So what if I dream? What's the use? What's the use? I can't dream of good things, I can only dream of dead people. I am the trash of the Xiajiang clan, I am trash. Yushu was dumbfounded. She could hear the pain in Xia Mingming's crying. Only then did she realize that her thinking was too simple. Dreaming about the life and death of people and determining the life and death of people, the difference was 1,000 miles. Determining the life and death was not knowing the life and death. If you don't know who will die, even if you know why and when they will die, what's the use? Yushu suddenly felt pity for her. With this kind of ability, she might as well not have it. Xia Mingming cried and stood up, wanting to run out. Seeing this, Yushu hurriedly chased after her and pulled her back outside the cave. She was afraid that she would get lost in the forest in her excitement. Let me go. Let me go. Xia Mingming struggled and reached out to slap Yushu. Her strength was quite painful. Yushu frowned and endured it. She didn't get angry at her. Instead, she grabbed her wrists and twisted them back. She hugged her and comforted her. Okay, don't cry. There are wolves in the forest. If you attract them, they will eat you first. Xia Mingming's body stiffened and then softened. She leaned her forehead on Yushu's shoulder and sobbed softly. In the blink of an eye, her tears had wetted Yushu's shoulder. Yushu was annoyed by her crying. She wanted to push her to the side, but she was afraid that she would run away. She could only hug her and wait for her to calm down. Yu Xiaoxiu and Kim Bao were squatting in the cave, looking at the two of them with their big and small eyes. After a while, when Yushu couldn't help but lose her temper, Xia Mingming finally stopped crying. She sniffled and raised her head from Yushu's shoulder. Because the two of them were hugging each other, her face was red. She twisted her body and said in a small voice, "Let me go." Not crying anymore? Yushu asked. Not crying anymore. Xia Mingming bit her lips. Her face was red like blood. Yushu immediately let go of her. She rubbed her ears and took a step back. She looked at her shoulder that was wet with tears and snot. She pointed to it and teased Xia Mingming, "You have to wash my clothes." Xia Mingming raised her head and looked at her. She was born beautiful with a pair of bright eyes. At this time she was shy and full of tears. Even a woman like Yushu couldn't take her eyes off her. "I'll wash them. Take them off later." After saying this, Xia Mingming turned around and ran into the stone cave. He had completely forgotten about learning the 6 Yao lines. Yushu stood outside the cave with her back turned. She rubbed her chin and whispered, "Xiajiang's family? What kind of family was that?" It sounded like a very impressive feat. Yu Xiaoxiu and Yushu were busy for the whole morning. They found 2 nests of eggs, which were the size of a crow's egg. They ate 2 eggs each and fed one to Kim Bao. Although it wasn't good, at least it didn't hurt his stomach. Jing Chen's fever didn't subside and he was still unconscious. In order to cool him down, Yushu tore her clothes into strips and wet them with water. She asked Yu Xiaoxiu to wipe his body. When she cleaned his wounds, she found that pus flowed out of his wounds. This worsening condition made Yushu extremely worried. She handed Jing Chen over to Yu Xiaoxiu to take care of while she took her sword and went out to see if there were any useful herbs in the forest. Xia Mingming could see that Yushu was in a heavy mood. He didn't pester her to learn the 6 lines, but he didn't give up the idea. In her previous life, after Shou Lei had been paralyzed, he had taken a lot of traditional Chinese medicine to nourish his body. Yushu had found a Chinese herbal medicine for him, so she had more or less heard of several kinds of medicinal herbs. At this time, she racked her brains to recall and wandered around the forest for an hour. As a result, she really did find some wild forget-me-nots near the stream that had fruits growing on them. The flowers were purple. Forget-me-nots were often seen in flower shops. Few people knew the real forget-me-nots. Its scientific name was blood-nourishing grass. Although it was often drunk as a flower tea, and Yushu didn't know if it could be applied externally, she couldn't care too much at this time. Yushu excitedly plucked a handful and washed them one by the water. She ran back to the cave and wrapped them up with a cloth. She squeezed them and used the juice to wash away the pus on Jingchen's wounds. Finally, she pasted the crushed herbs on his wounds and used a dry cloth to wrap it up again. She didn't know if it was the right cooling or the effect of the forget-me-nots, but at night, Jingchen's fever slowly subsided, but he still showed no signs of waking up. Chapter 136. As soon as night fell, Yushu started a fire in the cave to drive away the beasts nearby. Secondly, it made people feel more at ease when they saw the fire. Xia Mingming and Yu Xiaoxiu had already fallen asleep. They curled up next to the fire, covered with the grass collected from the forest during the day. Yushu guarded Jingchen. Every once in a while, she would touch his forehead to prevent him from getting hot again. There was a small pile of sundries beside her. She used the leather bag to hold things and filled it with water. She counted the things that she brought down from the boat. She wanted to cry and laugh at the same time. She wanted to cry because the precious manuals that she sorted out when she was learning from Qing Zheng were all lost on the boat. She wanted to laugh because she remembered all those things in her mind. She wanted to cry because she couldn't bring the 2 bags of silver given by Zhao Hui and the things she bought on the road. She wanted to laugh because the inner pocket that Zhao Hui sewed for her was still there, with 500 taels of silver notes in it. When they left Yang, Zhao Hui gave her 1,000 taels of silver notes. On the day of her wedding, Yushu secretly stuffed half of the notes under the mattress of her wedding bed and only took the 500 taels of silver she was supposed to get. But the 500 taels of silver were not as useful as a pair of flints for her now. From yesterday to tonight, they almost didn't earn any money. They only ate a few bird eggs to fill their stomachs. They couldn't survive in the forest for more than 2 days. They couldn't leave Jingchen like this. What was the use of having money? 500 taels of silver couldn't even buy half a sesame seed cake. She had to find a way to get something to eat. Yushu touched the bumpy bao dong in her hand. She turned over the branches on the side and found a branch in the shape of a girl. She untied the leather band on her hair and tested its elasticity. She tied it to the 2 ends of the branch and made a slingshot. She picked up a stone from the ground and tested its power against the outside of the cave. After adjusting the angle for a long time, she could barely bounce it 10 feet away. Let's go out to hunt birds tomorrow. If we can catch a few sparrows, it'll be good to roast them. Yushu calculated in her heart. She gathered a small pile of stones in the cave and sat down beside Jingchen. She faced the empty ground and practiced her aim, preparing for the battle. When the stones were emptied, she would pick up some more. She didn't know how much time had passed, but she couldn't stand it anymore and yawned. She looked outside and saw that the sky was about to brighten, so she got up and extinguished the fire. She brushed her messy hair, stretched, and lay down next to Jingchen. She closed her eyes and fell asleep. Not long after Yushu fell asleep, Jingchen, who was lying beside her, moved. He raised his hand and slowly touched his abdomen. He pressed lightly and the intense pain woke him up. He opened his heavy eyelids and noticed that someone was beside him. He turned his head and saw Yushu, who was curled up and sleeping beside him. He looked at her quietly for a while, moved his arm and felt for her on the ground. He gently held her hand, tilted his head and closed his eyes again. The sun rose and the sunlight shone into the cave. Yushu frowned and woke up. She raised her hand and wanted to rub her swollen forehead. But as soon as she moved, she found something wrong. She got up from the ground and looked down at her hand that was firmly held by Jingchen. Her eyes widened in surprise. Jingchen, Jingchen? She stretched out her other hand and gently shook Jingchen's shoulder. She stared at his face. After a few times, she saw Jingchen's long eyelashes tremble. He slowly opened his eyes, and her dirty face was reflected in his hazy eyes. Yushu grinned, grabbed his hand and held it tightly. She said excitedly, "Great, you're finally awake. You're finally awake." Clearly feeling Yushu's joy, Jingchen moved the corner of his mouth and smiled. This movement woke up Yu Xiaoxiu and Xia Mingming. They sat up from the haystack and looked at Yushu. After a while, they realized that Jingchen had woken up. Yu Xiaoxiu quickly climbed to Yushu's side and happily looked at Jingchen, who was awake. Xia Mingming was also happy at first, but then he uncomfortably turned around and tidied up his messy hair. Then only Yu Shu's attentive voice could be heard in the cave. Jing Chen, are you thirsty? Jing Chen, are you hurt? Jing Chen, does your wound hurt? Jing Chen, do you feel uncomfortable? Jing Chen could not speak, nor could he move. He could only lie down and let Yu Shu busy herself around him. Yu Xiaoxiu didn't care at this time. Yesterday, he heard from Yu Shu that it was Jing Chen who carried him all the way from the riverside with his injury. He was only grateful to Jing Chen, and for the time being he was not in the mood to care about the difference between a man and a woman. However, Xia Mingming, who hadn't heard a word from Yu Shu and her for the whole morning, was unhappy. Her stomach growled and she said with grievance, "Ah Shu, I'm hurt." The remaining 2 bird eggs from yesterday had been fed to Jing Chen by Yu Shu Sang. Now there were only 2 sour pomegranates left in the cave, and they had been occupied by Jin Bao. He was pushing and rolling them around as if they were toys. It was time to go out and find something to eat. Yu Shu said to Jing Chen, "I'll go out and get something to eat. You go back to sleep. If there's anything you can ask Xiaoxiu for help." Jing Chen nodded and pulled her palm, writing on it, "1 Be careful." "Okay." Yu Shu turned to Yu Xiaoxiu and said, "1 Xiaoxiu, you stay here and take care of Jing Chen. I will go out with Mingming to find something to eat." Xia Mingming heard her arrangement and immediately asked, "I'll go with you?" Jing Chen woke up and Yu Shu was in a good mood. She smiled and said to her, "Yes, why? Don't you want to go?" Xia Mingming hurriedly shook her head. "Go, go." After saying that, she felt a little anxious and said, I'm so bored in the cave. I want to go out for a walk." Yu Shu asked Yu Xiaoxiu to stay and take Xia Mingming away because she had her own considerations. Jing Chen had been unconscious for a day and 2 nights. Now that he had woken up, he must have some physiological problems to solve. It was not convenient for her and Xia Mingming to stay here. Yu Shu quickly packed up. She brought along a change of cloth, a sword for chopping firewood, and the crude slingshot she made last night. Then she led Xia Mingming out of the cave and into the forest. Although Yu Shu had no experience in surviving in the wild, she could be considered to be experienced and knowledgeable. She was also meticulous enough to walk in the forest. She was very careful not to go too deep. Once she found traces of wild beasts on the ground, she would stay far away. Moreover, she had the 6 lines in her hand. She could roughly judge which direction was safe and which was dangerous at any time and place. Xia Mingming followed her closely. Seeing her using the 6 lines for divination, his heart was itching. He wanted to ask her several times, but was interrupted by Yu Shu, so he couldn't find a chance to ask her for advice. There were many birds in the woods, but most of them flew in the air and landed on the trees. A small number of them liked to land on the ground. The wild sparrows in the forest were not afraid of people. Yu Shu tried a few times and found that as long as she approached them quietly, the sparrows would do whatever they wanted to do within a certain distance. Some would peck at insects while others would take a stroll. Fortunately, this distance was just within the range of her slingshot. However, because her equipment was not ideal, she scared away several groups of sparrows. After changing 4 or 5 places, Yu Shu finally succeeded. Xia Mingming was ordered by Yu Shu to stand to the side and not make a sound. He saw a fat sparrow not far away hit by Yu Shu's slingshot. It flopped back half a foot and lay on the ground. He jumped up excitedly and clapped his hands. "Hit it! Hit it! Ashu, you are amazing." Yu Shu went forward to pick up the struggling sparrow. She took a torn piece of cloth and tied its legs. She gave it to Xia Mingming and smiled. "Take it. This one is yours." Xia Mingming took it with a blush and said, "N." Then Yu Shu seemed to have found the feeling. She hit a few sparrows in succession and tied them all with ropes for Xia Mingming to carry. After counting 20 sparrows, she took him to the stream. Yu Shu taught Xia Mingming how to recognize the forget-me-nots. Then she handed the task of gathering herbs to her and went to the stream to record and wash the sparrows. Xia Mingming gathered a bag of herbs and excitedly ran to Yu Shu to show off. Seeing the ingredients, that had been washed clean and placed on the rocks, her face twisted. She turned her head and retched. Yu Shu looked at her in disgust and continued to work. Which chicken, duck, and fish on the table wasn't slaughtered like this? Xia Mingming was tactful and didn't say anything fake. Otherwise, during lunch today, Yu Shu would definitely kill her. There was no salt and it wasn't a special oven. Yu Shu roasted the sparrow until it was sticky. However, the fragrance of the meat wafted out. Xia Mingming and Yu Xiaoxiu swallowed it. "Water. Is it edible?" Yu Xiaoxiu asked. "It should be," Xia Mingming said. Yu Shu took the branch away from the fire, bowed her head and smelled it. She gave it to Xia Mingming, picked up another skewer and continued to roast it. Xia Mingming saw that Yu Shu gave the first skewer to him. He happily said thank you, and blew on it a few times. He couldn't wait to lower his head and take a bite. He burned his tongue, but he was reluctant to spit out the meat in his mouth. Yu Xiaoxiu, on the other hand, looked at his sister unhappily and pouted. When Yu Shu saw this, she smiled and put her arms around his neck. She whispered in his ear, "What's the hurry? Let her eat the burnt skewer. If I roast it again, I'll be more experienced. I'll give you something good to eat." Yu Xiaoxiu was happy again. He covered his mouth and smiled. He nodded and thought, his sister is really bad. Yu Shu's second skewer was indeed much better than the previous one. It was only a little burnt, so she gave it to Yu Men. She gave it to Yu Men and Xiu to eat. She gave it to Yu Men and roasted another skewer. After it was cooked, she washed it with water, scraped off the oil on the outside, and tore the tender meat inside. She turned her head and fed it to Jing Qin. "Open your mouth." Jing Qin cooperatively opened his mouth and let her feed him. He couldn't sit up due to the injury on his abdomen, so he could only lie down. Although he was awake, he still needed help to drink water and eat. "Is it delicious?" Jing Qin nodded. When she fed him again, he held her wrist and brought it to her mouth, using his eyes to signal her to eat. Yu Shu smiled and brought the piece of meat to her mouth. She chewed it. The meat without salt was sweet, but it had a faint fragrance. It really didn't taste bad. She licked her fingers, savoring the taste, and then tore it to feed Jing Chen. The roasted meat that was brought to his mouth was still hot. When it entered his mouth, her wet fingers brushed his lips, slightly itching. Jing Chen remembered Yu Shu's small action of licking her fingers just now. For some reason his throat was a little dry. Ahem. When Yu Shu heard Jing Chen's soft cough, she hurriedly asked, "Did you choke?" Chapter 137. Because Jing Chen's injury was very serious, it was inconvenient for him to move, so Yu Shu, the three of them, and the mouse stayed in the cave. Every day they relied on roasting sparrows, digging for eggs, and picking wild fruits to survive. After 10 days, Jing Chen's wound finally formed a new layer of scab, and it did not affect his walking anymore. Yu Shu decided to leave the forest the next morning to find a village outside and ask for directions to the capital. The day before they left, Yu Shu had made all the necessary preparations. She had a bag of fresh bird eggs and wild fruits to serve as dry rations for the journey, washed and dried medicinal herbs, and a walking stick that she had sharpened for Jing Chen in the past 2 days. That night, Yu Shu let Xia Mingming and Yu Xiaoxiu take turns to keep watch, while she slept soundly. Because tomorrow she would lead the way out of the forest, she needed to recover enough energy so that she could use the 6 lines divination to find the direction. The next day at dawn, Yu Xiaoxiu woke Yu Shu up after keeping watch for the second half of the night. They packed up and Yu Shu led them out of the cave to the stream. After freshening up, they filled a leather bag with water, and according to Yu Shu's divination, they moved towards the east where the sun rose. Jing Chen's body was weak, so Yu Shu and Yu Xiaoxiu took turns to support him. Every time he slowed down, Yu Shu would take the initiative to stop and find a shady tree to rest. When Jing Chen recovered his strength, they would continue to move forward. Only Kim Bao was the most relaxed. He sat on Yu Xiaoxiu's shoulder and looked around effortlessly. It was easy to get lost walking in the forest. Fortunately, Yu Shu was good at divination. They walked and stopped from time to time. They slept in the forest for 1 night. Another day passed. On the 3rd day at dusk, they climbed over a small hill and finally saw the smoke of a distant field. Yu Shu and the others were overjoyed and quickened their pace to the village. When they passed by the ridge, they saw the villagers working in the field. Yu Shu took the initiative to talk to them, claiming that they were travelers who had unfortunately sunk on the river and came here to ask the villagers to let them stay for the night. The small village, which was far away from the city, was self-sufficient and simple. When they heard about what had happened to Yu Shu and the others, they were very sympathetic. At that time, a warm-hearted villager picked up the farm tools and led them back to discuss with the village chief. Although the 4 of them were dressed shabbily and looked shabby, they all looked neat and tidy. They talked and behaved politely. The village head was older and had some experience. When he saw them, he asked people to clean up the empty house and let them stay for the night. He also provided them with a meal. Yu Shu and the others had eaten in the wild for more than 10 days. Their tongues were almost rotten. Finally they had a hot meal. Except for Jing Chen, everyone ate until they were full. After dinner, Yu Shu and Xia Mingming went to the village head's house to thank him and ask for the way to the capital. The village head couldn't tell them where the capital was, so he suggested that they go to a nearby town to ask. Under Yushu's request, he agreed to send someone to send them there tomorrow. At night, sleeping was a problem. There were only 2 wooden beds in the house, but there were 4 of them. Jing Chen couldn't sleep on the floor, Xia Mingming couldn't sleep on the floor, and Yushu was tired to death. She finally saw a bed, so of course she didn't want to sleep on the floor, and she wouldn't let Yu Xiaoxiu sleep on the floor. There's no other way. Let's squeeze. Yushu said. Xia Mingming hesitated and said, that bed can't sleep the 3 of you, right? Because of Yushu's calm and strong performance these days, Xia Mingming didn't doubt her gender and always treated her as a boy. In her view, she was the only girl in the house. If there was to be a squeeze, it could only be the 3 of them. Yushu glanced at her with a smile and walked over to sit on an empty bed. She patted the space beside her and said, Mingming will sleep with me. Xia Mingming, who was still considering whether the bed could fit 3 people, blushed when she heard this. She said to Yushu angrily, you baddie, who wants to sleep with you? After saying that, she opened the door and ran out, not giving Yushu a chance to finish her sentence. Yushu rubbed the space between her eyebrows and got up to chase after her. Seeing this, Jing Chen stood up from the bed and wanted to follow Yushu, but Yu Xiaoxiu stopped him. Brother Jing, don't go. You've been walking for the whole day, you should rest early. Yushu found Xia Mingming by the well in the village. She was leaning against a tree and kicking the pebbles under her feet with her head down. Yushu thought for a while and walked up to her. Mingming, I have something to say to you. Yushu had to admit that she had deliberately hidden the fact that she was a girl from Xia Mingming during their stay in the cave. Firstly, it was because she had to take care of Jing Chen, and she felt that it would make them feel uncomfortable if she told them about it. Secondly, it was because she was worried about Xia Mingming, who came from an unknown background, and she had always been on guard. However, after spending some time with her, Yushu realized that Xia Mingming wasn't as spoiled and headstrong as she appeared to be. She would follow her to hunt sparrows in the forest for the whole day without complaining about being tired. She wouldn't even wipe her tears when she cut her hand while picking herbs, and she wouldn't sit around waiting to eat for free just because she was a girl. Other than taking care of Jing Chen, she would obediently listen to everything that Yushu asked her to do. It was quite rare for her to be able to do this at her age. Yushu admired strong people, and Xia Mingming had won her respect in this aspect. Yushu wasn't blind, and she could more or less sense this little girl's attentive attitude towards her. She didn't want Xia Mingming to misunderstand so that she wouldn't unintentionally hurt her heart in the future. Thus, when they left the cave, Yushu planned to find a suitable opportunity to make things clear to her. Thus, when they were distributing the beds, Yushu took the opportunity to bring it up. Xia Mingming quickly raised her head and glanced at Yushu, thinking about what she would say to her. A young girl's imagination couldn't help but have some fantasies. She suddenly felt shy and pouted, "What do you want to say?" Seeing her like this, Yushu secretly had a headache. The words that were at the tip of her tongue rolled twice before she finally said, "Actually, I am Miss Hua." She enunciated her words clearly, not missing a single word. Xia Mingming, who heard every single word, was stunned. The flush on her face did not fade, but a layer of stiffness appeared on her face. She slowly widened her eyes and stared at Yushu, stuttering, You said you are? Yushu bitterly smiled, "I'm sorry for hiding it from you on the way here. Xiaoxiu and I are brother and sister. I am not his older brother but his older sister." Afraid that Xia Mingming didn't believe her, Yushu took a step forward and pulled Xia Mingming's hand. She pressed it on her chest that wasn't moving up and down, but still existed. "I am the same as you." What her palm touched was real. Xia Mingming's face alternated between red and white. She raised her hand to cover her mouth, shaking her head, and stared in disbelief at Yushu's delicate and pretty face. Her eyes gradually turned red, and when she blinked, 2 crystal-clear tears fell. Seeing this, Yushu actually didn't know how to deal with it. She thought that after telling Xia Mingming she might be angry or even annoyed, but she didn't expect that she would cry. Mingming?" Yushu stretched out her hand wanting to comfort her but was slapped away by Xia Mingming. Xia Mingming pushed her away and ran away from her. Yushu turned around and chased a few steps. Watching her rush into the hut where they were staying tonight, she slowed down her pace, walked to the door and quietly stood for a long time before entering. Inside the hut, Xia Mingming was lying on the bed, with her back facing the direction of the door, motionless as if she was crying to sleep. Jing Chen and Yu Xiaoxiu were looking at her in confusion. When they saw Yushu coming in, they turned their puzzlement to Yushu. Yushu didn't have the energy to explain to them, so she waved her hand and said to them, "Sleep early." After saying that, she went to get the straw mat behind the door and spread it on the floor. She shook off the thin quilt that was piled at Xia Mingming's feet and gently covered her body with it. She turned around and laid down on the hard mat, using her arm as a pillow, and closed her eyes. After a moment she heard the sound of footsteps on the floor. She opened her eyes a little and saw Jing Chen spread another mat beside her, slowly sitting down and slowly lying down. He turned his body to face her and copied her, using his arm as a pillow, and looked at her with his dark and bright eyes. Yushu couldn't help laughing in a low voice. She stretched out her finger and poked his shoulder, whispering, "What are you doing? Quickly go to bed and sleep." Jing Chen held her finger, opened her palm and wrote, "I want to sleep with you." Yushu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She angrily stared at him and sat up from the floor. She rubbed her face and her mood, which was messed up by Xia Mingming, became better. Yu Xiaoxiu frowned as he looked at Xia Mingming, who was occupying the whole bed. He was about to tell her to get up and move when he saw Yushu get up from the floor and walk to the bed behind him. She rolled up the quilt and urged Jing Chen to get up from the floor. She spread the thin quilt on the 2 straw mats and pointed to the floor. "Xiaoxiu will sleep in the middle, Jing Chen will sleep over there, and I will sleep over here." After saying that, she took off her shoes and lay down on the floor. She stretched and yawned at the 2 people. "Put out the oil lamp and go to sleep. We have to get up early to go to town tomorrow." Jing Chen obediently lay down, leaving the space in the middle for Yu Xiaoxiu. Yu Xiaoxiu looked at them, touched his head and went to put out the oil lamp. He held the lazy Kim Bao and lay down between Yushu and Jing Chen. He rubbed the fluff on Kim Bao's back and put it on his stomach. Kim Bao swung his tail, rested his chin on his 2 front paws and blinked his eyes. Soon they fell asleep one after another. This was the first time in more than 10 days that Yushu slept with them. She didn't need to stare at the fire, think about what to eat tomorrow and wait alone until dawn. It was a quiet night. The next day Yushu was the last one to get up. Yu Xiaoxiu, who woke up early, woke up Yushu and pushed her up. "Sit on the bed over there, I will make the bedding." Yushu walked to the bed in her shoes, sat down next to Jing Chen and looked around the room. She didn't see Xia Mingming. She frowned and was about to ask Yu Xiaoxiu when she saw Xia Mingming coming in from the door with a basin of water. Xia Mingming looked at Yushu and turned his head away awkwardly. He walked in and put the basin on the table, wrung the towel in the basin, turned around and strode to Yushu, handed the towel to her and said to her angrily, "You got up so late, wash your face." Chapter 138. Comrade Wuxia, I would like to speak to the Secretary of the Southern Province Commission for Discipline Inspection, Comrade Yen Sai. Can you give me his private number? Li said lightly. When he said Yen Sai's name, it was as if he was saying an ordinary person's name. Niu Dehong felt a toothache. He thought to himself that this guy was really good at acting so well. Yen Sai? Oh, the Provincial Commission for Discipline Inspection Secretary was really called Yen Sai. This guy really had some tricks up his sleeve. Zhuxiaoxia laughed. Yo, Director Li, what's the matter that made you so angry? You even want to disturb our Secretary Yen? Tell me who made you angry. I'll help you vent your anger. Li roughly explained the situation and then said seriously, Comrade Zhuxiaoxia, this matter is very serious. You must inform the Liang City Commission for Discipline Inspection, and ask them to come and deal with it. Zhuxiaoxia knew that Li was really angry. He used an official tone throughout the call. Please rest assured, Director. I'll inform the Liang City Commission for Discipline Inspection Secretary Zhu. Liang City Commission for Discipline Inspection Secretary Zhu was watching TV with his wife and son at home. His phone suddenly rang. It was another unknown number. It was very strange. Just as he was about to answer, his wife snatched the phone from him. It's so late, who's calling? Zhu Tong said unhappily, What do you mean? This is a work phone. Will you take responsibility if work is delayed? Madame Zhu said, I just want to listen to the other person's voice. If it's a man, I'll leave it to you. Zhu Tong said, We're old married couple and you still don't trust me. I'm in charge of discipline inspection. How could I do something against the rules? Madame Zhu said, I don't think you're old at all. Men are 41 flowers. The last time I went to your unit, I saw 2 young girls surrounding you. They're colleagues? Zhu Tong waved his hand. Hurry up and answer. Don't delay official business. Madame Zhu pressed the answer button and put the phone to her ear, not saying a word. A sweet female voice came from the phone. May I ask if this is Secretary Zhu of Liang City Commission for Discipline Inspection? Madame Zhu was immediately angry. She threw the phone at Zhu Tong. It's for you? A woman. Zhu Tong smiled awkwardly. He picked up the phone and put it to his ear. The voice on the other end kept ringing. Hello? Hello, who is this? Zhu Tong pretended to be serious and asked. Madame Zhu held the remote control and kept changing channels. Her mind was preoccupied with Zhu Tong's conversation. Secretary Zhu, I'm Zhua Xiaoxia from the Provincial Disciplinary Committee. Director Zhua, hello. Why are you calling so late at night? What's the matter? Zhu Tong's expression was really serious. There's a matter. Li Zhu Jing is currently in the Qingshan County Public Security Bureau. Please take some time to deal with it. Zhu Shu is busy, I can come down. I'm free. I'll deal with it right away. When Zhu Tong heard that Li Yi, the deputy director of the 8th Office of the Central Commission for Discipline Inspection, was trapped in the Qingshan County Public Security Bureau, his expression was no longer serious, but dark. After hanging up the phone with Zhua Xiaoxia, he said to his wife, How dare you be jealous of Director Zhua of the Provincial Disciplinary Commission? Something big had happened. You bitch, you only know how to be jealous. Isn't it just an excuse to fool around? Madame Zhu looked at him with disdain. Her meaning was that his lies were too weak to withstand a single blow. Unreasonable. Zhu Tong couldn't be bothered to argue with her. He quickly dialed the number of the municipal committee secretary and reported this matter to the municipal committee. When Zhu Tong reported to the municipal committee secretary, he had already made the situation extremely urgent. It was as if Li Yi was in deep water. If they didn't rescue him, he would be in danger. The municipal committee secretary took it seriously. The deputy director of the 8th Office of the Central Commission for Discipline Inspection was 3 ranks higher than him. Li Yi was 3 ranks higher than him. If that was the case, then Li Yi was much more powerful than him as city committee secretary. If anything happened to Li Yi in Liang, then his position as the municipal committee secretary would come to an end. He immediately made a call to the leaders of the Qingshan County government. He ordered them to rescue Comrade Li Yi immediately. The people of the Qingshan County government didn't hear the situation clearly from the municipal committee secretary, but they understood a few things. A high-ranking official of the Central Commission for Discipline Inspection was arrested by the Public Security Bureau of Qingshan County. His life was in danger. They must go and rescue him immediately. After putting down the phone, the leaders of the Qingshan County government rushed to the Public Security Bureau. There was no small matter in the government. Li Yi's phone call had turned the Qingshan County upside down. When the number 1 and number 2 cars of the county party committee arrived at the Public Security Bureau, Niu Dehong was still arguing with Li Yi. Niu Dehong was surprised to see the secretary of the county party committee and the head of the county party committee. The secretary of the county party committee was a middle-aged man in his 40s with slicked back hair. He had the dignity of a leader. After he got off the car, he asked in a deep voice, "What's going on?" Niu Dehong replied, "Secretary Jiang, a worker from Mapo Town came to petition and got into a fight. He was brought back by the Public Security Bureau for questioning. It has been handled." Secretary Jiang said, "What about Li Yi from the Central Commission for Discipline Inspection?" Niu Dehong's heart skipped a beat. He said, "Is Li Yi really from the Central Commission for Discipline Inspection? Isn't he a liar?" "Liar your head." Secretary Jiang ignored Niu Dehong and strode towards the crowd. He asked, "Excuse me, may I ask who is Li Yi?" Li Yi replied indifferently, "That's me." Secretary Jiang immediately changed his expression. He smiled and extended his hands towards Li Yi. He said, "Oh Li Yi, nice to meet you. I'm the secretary of the Qingshan County Party Committee, Jiang Fei. Director Li's presence in our county must have startled you." Li Yi stood still and shook hands with him. He laughed and said, "I'm not startled, but I got to watch a good show. Secretary Jiang, do you want to listen?" The head of Qingshan County walked up and shook hands with Li Yi. He smiled and said, "Director Li, nice to meet you. I'm the head of Qingshan County, Gao Jinlong. Nice to meet you." Li Yi replied indifferently, "Hello, head Gao." Gao Jinlong glanced at the scene and asked, "Who can tell me what's going on?" Niu Dehong stepped forward and said, "Secretary Jiang, head Gao, the situation is like this. The workers of Mapo Town are not satisfied with the restructuring of the township enterprises. They came to the county government's residence to cause trouble. They had a conflict with the guards." Gao Jinlong said, "I'm not asking about that. I'm asking you, why is Director Li in the Public Security Bureau? What's going on here?" Niu Dehong said, "I don't know. When I came he was already here." Li Yi said, "I came with the workers." "Head Gao, How can you mess with the restructuring of the township enterprises in your county? If this goes on, there will be a big mess. Gao Jinlong said, the restructuring of the township enterprises, we copied the experience of Lini County in Shizhou City. For this, we even organized an investigation team to learn from Lini County. Li Yi frowned and said, Head Gao, do you know what Lini County is doing? Are you sure you learned the essence of the Lini model? Gao Jinlong laughed and said, Of course. Isn't it just taking back the enterprise and asking the workers to buy shares? This way the government will have the money to revitalize the enterprise. It's such a simple method and it's easy to learn. Haha, the person who came up with this method is really amazing. Not only did it solve the financial problems of the county and town, but it also revitalized the enterprise. Li Yi said in a deep voice, Since you have been to Lini County for an investigation, then do you know who proposed the restructuring of the township enterprises? Jiang Fei laughed and said, I know this. It's the former Lini County Party Committee Secretary Li Yi. Li? Could it be that you are the former Lini County Party Committee Secretary Li? Li nodded and said, Yes, it's me. Is the Lini model what you think it is? What did you learn from the investigation? Jiang Fei saw that the direction of the situation was not right and quickly said, Director Li, I am in charge of the party's affairs. County Head Gao is in charge of the government affairs. Gao Jinlong wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. He thought to himself that Jiang Fei had escaped really quickly. Without your approval, do you think the government would dare to do this? But now that the situation is pressing, he had no other way out. He could only brace himself and said, Director Li, if there's anything wrong with our work, please advise us. Seeing how the county's secretary and the county's mayor were afraid of Li Yi, the onlookers were all very surprised. Lu Ruosi also did not understand what was going on. She had no concept of the positions and departments in the system. She only knew that the position of the Public Security Bureau chief in the county was already very high, but the position of the county mayor was even higher, and Li Yi's position seemed to be even higher than the county mayor. But how high is Li Yi's position? What department is the Central Commission for Discipline Inspection? And how high is the director? She does not know. If she does not know, then the rest of the workers are even more confused. But they can see that Li Yi intimidated the county party committee secretary and county head. Cici, didn't you say that he is your boss? Why is he a high-ranking official? Lu's mother asked softly. Lu Ruosi replied, I also do not know. Mom, Li Yi said that he will help us. Lu Qing said, a high-ranking official is good. With a high-ranking official helping us, we will have a chance. Sis, what is brother-in-law's position? You are still hiding it from us. Really, although we are a family, you married a high-ranking official. We should also enjoy our lives. Lu Ruosi said, don't talk nonsense. I am really not his girlfriend. Lu Qing laughed, I understand. Are you two still in the early stages of love? You two have not entered the real stage of love yet. Lu Ruosi rolled her eyes and ignored him. Li Yi said to Gao Jinlong, County Head Gao, let me ask you. What is the purpose of this restructuring? Chapter 139. Kaifeng, originally known as Bianzhou, was the capital of Houyang hundreds of years ago. Later, it was designated as the capital of the world by the Northern Song dynasty. After Emperor Anwu re-established the dynasty, he ruled the Southern Song dynasty for 3 years. Kaifeng Prefecture governed 11 counties, and Kaifeng County was known as Quxian. Yu Shu and the others arrived at the county by car the next morning. On the way, they had already eaten the dry food given by the villagers. They were now hungry and tired. As soon as they got off the car, Yu Shu anxiously inquired about the location of the Five Blessings Bank in the city. She found a shady place and asked Yu Xiaoxiu to stay with Jing Qin to wait. She took Xia Mingming and asked along the way to find the bank. When exchanging the banknotes, they went through a lot of trouble. Everywhere they went, there was no lack of snobs. 500 taels of banknotes was not a small amount. 2 young men in ragged clothes coming to take it was not suspicious. If not for Yu Shu's tough attitude, she was afraid that if she showed a little bit of guilt, she would be regarded as a small thief. The thief was taken to see the official. After exchanging 100 taels of banknotes and 2 bags of silver, Yu Shu and Xia Mingming directly rented a carriage on the street and went to the city gate to pick up Jing Jian and Yu Xiaoxiu. They found a famous big inn in the city and asked for 2 superior rooms. With money, it was easy to talk anywhere. Throwing a piece of silver as a tip, a waiter bowed his head and led them into the inner courtyard. When they went up to the 2nd floor, it was already past noon. In the superior room that cost 2 taels of silver a night, there was a folding chair, bed, wardrobe, and desk. There were 2 doors, a living room and a bedroom. There were 2 beds in the room, one for the master and the other for the servants. The bedding was newly changed. There was also a flower pot in front of the window with a pink and white hibiscus plant. When Yu Shu saw the flower pot, she felt that it was interesting. The hibiscus plant was placed in the south, which was a feng shui method. It seemed that this inn was good at doing business. Boil 2 buckets of hot water for bathing and send it to the room. Also, go and prepare your signature dishes. There is no need for wine. Yu Shu ordered the waiter. Yes, sir, please have a rest first. I will bring it to you in a moment. As soon as the waiter left, Xia Mingming couldn't wait to throw himself on the big bed. He rolled on the soft quilt and moaned, "It's too comfortable. I want to sleep for 2 days and 2 nights." Yu Shu smiled and hung the leather bag that was used to survive in the forest on the head of the bed. She said to Xia Mingming, "I'll go out and buy some clothes. The food will be delivered later. You can eat first." Hearing this, Xia Mingming immediately sat up on the bed. "I'll go with you." She was still wearing the clothes that she had changed into when Yu Shu rescued her from the lower cabin. After wearing it for half a month, she smelled moldy and wanted to change her clothes for a long time. "No need. If you're tired, you can rest for a while. I'll go," Yu Shu said. She took off the ancient sword wrapped in rags from her back and put it at the end of the bed. She only took the silver and went out. Xia Mingming looked at her back until he heard the sound of the door closing. Only then did he reach out to cover his wildly beating heart. He turned around and lay back on the bed, punched the pillow and whined in a low voice, "Ah, why is she a woman?" Yu Shu asked the innkeeper of the inn. In an alley across the street, she found a ready-made clothing store. She bought a few sets of new clothes. She didn't even forget her shoes and socks. Under the smiling face of the innkeeper, she carried the big and small bags back to the inn. She kicked the door. The person who opened the door was not Xia Mingming but Yu Xiaoxiu. Not long after Yu Shu left, Yu Xiaoxiu came to the next room to find her. The waiter came to deliver the food. He called Jing Qin to wait for Yu Shu to come back. Quick, quick, help me carry this." Yu Shu stuffed half of the things in her hands into Yu Xiaoxiu's hands. Xia Mingming also came to help. The 3 of them piled the clothes on the couch in the living room and spread them on the bed. Xia Mingming excitedly rummaged through the clothes, only to find that there wasn't a single skirt. She turned to Yu Shu with an unfriendly expression and said, "Why didn't you buy my clothes?" Yu Shu bent down and rummaged through the clothes. She took out 2 pieces of clothing and handed them to her. "Here, they're yours." Xia Mingming frowned. "Why are they men's clothes?" "Of course it's for the convenience of the journey," Yu Shu said. Xia Mingming pouted. "I don't care. I want to wear a skirt." In the end, she was still a girl. Dressing up as a man was just a novelty. She had no choice but to do so. Now that she had a chance to wear a beautiful skirt, she naturally didn't want to dress up as a man with rough hands and feet. Either you change it or you don't. Yu Shu didn't want to spoil her. She stuffed the clothes into her hands and took the wet towel that Yu Xiaoxiu handed to her. She wiped the sweat off her face and sat down at the table to eat. The food was a little cold, but it was perfect for summer. Yu Shu picked up a bowl of plain white rice. Seeing that Jing Chen hadn't moved his chopsticks, she tore open a fragrant chicken drumstick and placed it in his bowl. "Hurry up and eat. Once you're done, go take a bath and sleep. I'll find a doctor for you." Jing Jian nodded and picked up his chopsticks. He tore open the remaining chicken drumstick and placed it in Yu Shu's bowl. When Xia Mingming saw this, she hurriedly threw down her clothes and ran over. "I want to eat chicken drumsticks too." "There's no more." Yu Shu stuffed the chicken drumstick into her mouth and said with a lisp, "Wu, you can have the chicken neck." Xia Mingming turned to look at the chicken drumstick in Jing Chen's bowl. She held out the bowl and threatened, "Give me the drumstick." Jing Chen looked up at her and picked up the chicken drumstick that Yu Shu had just placed in his bowl. He lowered his head and took a bite of it. Then he looked up at Xia Mingming. His innocent eyes clearly said, "This is mine." Xia Mingming was so angry that her teeth itched. She silently said in her heart, "Don't bother with the mute." She turned around and wanted to tear the chicken wings. However, she found that the 2 wings had been occupied by Yu Xiaoxiu. In addition to the breast frame, there was only the chicken butt and the chicken neck left on the oily roasted chicken. "You ganged up to bully me." Xia Mingming sat down aggrievedly and picked up the chopsticks to eat the rice. She was full of resentment. Yu Shu and others were not affected by her mood at all. When they were hungry, they didn't talk so much nonsense. They swept up the delicious food on the table and leaned against the back of the chair with their bellies sticking out. Under the table, Kim Bao was lying on an empty plate with his belly sticking out like them. Yu Shu saw Xia Mingming was unhappy because she didn't eat the chicken drumstick, so she said, "Well, it's just a chicken drumstick. I'll buy it for you in the evening." "Who cares?" Xia Mingming snorted softly, but her face was no longer depressed. She didn't care about the chicken drumstick but wanted someone to care about her. After eating, a waiter in the inn carried hot water upstairs to 2 rooms. Yu Shu urged Yu Xiaoxiu and Jing Chen to go back to their room to take a bath, but she was stopped by Jing Chen at the door. Seeing that he had something to say, Yu Shu stretched out her hand and saw him write, "Do you want to marry Miss Xia?" Cough. Yu Shu almost coughed up blood. "Why would I marry her?" Jing Chen looked serious, lowered his head and continued to write on her hand. "Last time, you said that a girl's body can't be seen by a man, and if you see her, you must marry her. If you take a bath with her and sleep with her, won't you marry her?" On the ship, when Yu Shu rescued Xia Mingming from the bottom of the cabin, in order to let her breathe, she took off her clothes. At that time she asked Jing Chen and Yu Xiaoxiu to leave. At that time Jing Chen didn't know what marry meant. Later, after a few days in the forest, he remembered that Yu Shu went out to hunt birds and wasn't in the cave, so he asked Yu Xiaoxiu. Yu Xiaoxiu was only a child, so how could he explain it clearly? He told him that marry meant that a man and a woman got married, and the man would support the woman. They would eat together, sleep in the same bed and sleep under the same quilt. They would have children and live together for the rest of their lives. After Jing Chen lost his memory, although he didn't understand the affairs of the world, he roughly understood from what Yu Xiaoxiu said. Marry was a very important matter. It was a very important matter. During the half a month in the forest, they slept outdoors without a bed or quilt. Now they stayed in an inn and were assigned rooms with a bed and quilt. Jing Chen saw that Yu Shu and Xia Mingming slept in the same room and even took a bath together, so he asked this question. This was a very simple question, and Yu Shu could answer him with one sentence, but she was stumped. She looked at Jing Chen with a complicated expression, not knowing how to answer. Whether before or after losing her memory, she never told Jing Chen that she was a woman. She deliberately hid it before, and then she took advantage of the situation. At first, it was to make it convenient for her to take care of him. There was always a difference between men and women, and there were too many people on the boat. Later, in the forest, she got in the way of Xia Mingming. She finally made it clear to Xia Mingming, but she was busy on the road, so she didn't have a chance to explain it to Jing Chen. She didn't feel any guilt for lying to Xia Mingming, but she felt an indescribable guilt for lying to Jing Chen. It wasn't toward the Jing Chen after he lost his memories, but toward the Jing Chen before he lost his memories. When they were still in Yang City, Jing Chen was very honest with her. Not only did he not hide his origin, but he even told her the secret of him committing the crime of Jidu Xing. But she hid it from him. Compared to Jing Chen's sincerity, she seemed hypocritical. In fact, whether she was a man or a woman was not a big problem, and it didn't affect anything. But because she lied to Jing Chen before, it became very difficult for her to say it. She was a woman who was good at lying. She could find an excuse to fool him and continue to let him think that she was a man, which was convenient for everyone. However, facing Jing Chen, who trusted and relied on her, looking at his clean and bright eyes, she just didn't want to lie to him. Jing Chen, actually I am... brother? A shout interrupted Yu Shu's words. Yu Xiaoxiu, who had been standing at the door listening to their conversation, reached out and grabbed Yu Shu at this time. "I have something to say to you." Jing Chen saw Yu Xiaoxiu pulling Yu Shu away in front of him. He wanted to follow them, but Yu Xiaoxiu turned his head and stopped him. "Brother Jing, don't come over. We need to whisper." Jing Chen stopped and watched them run away. Xia Mingming divided the clothes and came out of the inner room to look for Yu Shu. Seeing Jing Chen standing at the door, she asked, "Where is Ashu?" Jing Chen raised his finger and pointed to the front. Xia Mingming wanted to go over to look for him without thinking, but Jing Chen reached out his hand and stopped her. "What do you call it?" Xia Mingming said unhappily. Jing Chen couldn't speak, so he stretched out his hand and opened it in front of her. On it he wrote, "You can't go over." Xia Mingming rolled her eyes and pointed behind Jing Chen. "Ashu." Chapter 140. Yu Xiaoxiu pulls Yu Shu through the stairs to the courtyard. He looks around and sees no one. He turns around and asks Yu Shu, "Sister, are you going to tell Brother Jing that you are a woman?" Yu Shu nods. "I didn't tell him before because we were on the boat. Now that he knows that I am a woman, there is nothing I can't tell him." Yu Xiaoxiu braces himself and says, "I think you'd better not tell him first." Yu Shu asks in surprise, "Why?" Yu Xiaoxiu bows his head guiltily and picks his fingers. Yu Shu raises her eyebrows and puts her hand on his shoulder. She says patiently, Xiaoxiu, tell me, why can't I tell Jing Chen? Because. Yu Xiaoxiu whispers. Yu Shu leaned forward and tilted her ear. What did he say? Because I'm afraid that he'll pester you. Yu Xiaoxiu put down her hand resentfully and said, I've told Big Brother Jing before that when a man and a woman have physical contact, they have to get married. Big Brother Jing is a stubborn person now. He'll believe whatever you say. You've been taking care of him these past few days, and if he finds out that you're a woman, he'll definitely think too much. I'm afraid that he'll pester you then. Yu Shu straightens up and looks at her brother strangely. She begins to blame herself. Did she not pay enough attention to Yu Xiaoxiu's education recently? Otherwise, how could he have the time to think about these adult things? Is this something he should worry about at his age? Listen carefully, Xiaoxiu. Listen up, little Xiu. I'm taking care of Jing Chen for 2 reasons. Firstly, it's out of righteousness, and secondly, it's out of friendship. A person should know how to repay a debt of gratitude. Jing Chen saved us once in Yang City, and later on he did me a huge favor. He treats me with sincerity, and I view him as a friend. Even if I overstep my boundaries when he's heavily injured, it's only a matter of convenience. Just like what you said about skin contact, we can't talk without consent. As for what you said about being afraid that he'll pester me, do you think Jing Chen is that kind of person? Yu Shu explains to Yu Xiaoxiu seriously. Yu Xiaoxiu blushes and feels that what he said just now is too much. When he is about to admit his mistake, Jing Chen changes the topic and continues, however, you are right about one thing. Jing Chen is a little stubborn now. He believes whatever you say. What I said to you just now is reasonable and he may not understand it. Well, just hide it from him for now. When he knows more about the world, then tell him. Yu Xiaoxiu raises his head and says in a daze, so you don't want to tell him first? Yu Shu nods. She changes her mind at the last minute because she thinks that Jing Chen asked her if she wants to marry Xia Mingming at the door. His seriousness is the same as before he lost his memory. Yu Xiaoxiu's words remind her that if he really knows that she is a woman, it may be a troublesome thing. Instead of making everyone feel awkward at that time, it is better to be muddle-headed. There is another point that Yu Shu doesn't want to admit. When she is about to confess to Jing Chen just now, she is pulled away by Yu Xiaoxiu. The emotion that has been brewing with great difficulty is gone. It is really not easy to ask her to speak again. Thinking about how she will explain to Jing Chen that she has changed from a man to a woman, she has a headache. After the discussion, the sister and brother are about to go back to the room. When they turn their faces, they see Xia Mingming showing half of his body in the corner of the wall. They don't know where she heard so much. Yu Shu frowns while Yu Xiaoxiu says angrily, you eavesdropped on our conversation. Being discovered, Xia Mingming stands up boldly, throws a glance at Yu Xiaoxiu and says to Yu Shu with a clear look, it turns out that you have known him for a long time. No wonder you would do your best to take care of a stranger on the boat. When they are still in the forest, Xia Mingming always hears Yu Shu and Yu Xiaoxiu calling Jing Chen Jing Chen. He thinks that it is a new name for Jing Chen. Now hearing their private conversation, he suddenly realizes that they know each other. Yu Shu and Yu Xiaoxiu look at each other. The former pushes the latter's shoulder and walks forward. They turn a blind eye to Xia Mingming and walk towards the direction of the room. Xiaoxiu, remember to wash Jing Chen's hair later. His underwear is in the paper bag. The small one is yours. Don't wear the wrong one. Sister, don't say it so loudly. I am your sister. What are you afraid of? Xia Mingming, who is ignored, stands there stupidly for a while. Seeing the sister and brother go far away and enter their respective rooms, she suddenly comes to herself and chases after them. Ashu, didn't you hear me? Why are you ignoring me? Yu Shu is tidying up the new clothes on the couch. She turns her head and looks at Xia Mingming, who rushes in to question her. She says calmly, close the door. Xia Mingming closed the door and bolted it. Only then did he realize why he was so obedient. He stomped over and said angrily, I'm talking to you. Don't try to play dumb with me. You guys knew Jing Chen from before, right? What exactly happened? Come and take a bath. Yu Shu picks up the underwear for washing. She grabs Xia Mingming's wrist with one hand and pulls her into the inner room. When he entered the room, he saw the large bathtub behind the screen that was emitting hot steam. When he turned his head, he saw that Yu Shu had already begun to undress. Xia Mingming immediately forgot what he wanted to say just now and stammered, You and I are bathing together? Yu Shu rolls her eyes at her. What else? Are you going to use the water that I have washed? Hurry up. You are going to be rotten. Stand outside and take a bath first. Then you can scrub my back later. As a result, Xia Mingming dizzily follows Yushu to take a bath. After half an hour she comes out from behind the screen with her head heavy. She lies on the bed and watches Yushu put on a pair of trousers and a pair of boots. She coils up her hair and walks out the door in a refreshed manner. In the end she still can't get an answer. Yushu invites an old doctor to a large medical center a little further away from the inn. She directly uses a carriage to bring people back to the inn. She leads them to the inner courtyard and diagnoses Jing Chen. As for Jing Chen's injury, Yushu makes up a story to deal with the old doctor's bewilderment. Your brother was not treated in time when he was injured and lost his essence qi. Right now, his qi and blood are insufficient and his meridians are cold. Fortunately, his body has a good foundation. He must have practiced martial arts and has internal energy to protect his body. Otherwise, his internal organs and meridians will be damaged. As for this internal injury, this old man is powerless. I can only prescribe a nourishing prescription and slowly nurse his body back to health. After listening to this diagnosis, Yushu lets out a sigh of relief. She looks at Jing Chen after his bath. Although there is some color in his complexion, it is difficult to hide his weak appearance. She suddenly remembers the first time they met. He came walking on the moon, graceful and free, untainted by the mortal world. Suddenly her heart becomes heavy. In the past he could come and go as he pleased. Now he can't even move an inch. Every few steps he takes a breath. Yushu leads the old doctor to the side and quietly asks, "Are you saying that he also has internal injuries?" The old doctor slowly says, "This old man has practiced medicine for many years and has met some Jianghu people. I heard that martial artists have strong bodies. Just a superficial injury will not cause this. It must be an internal injury that causes a deficiency of qi and blood and a weak body. If young master knows other martial artists, there is no harm in asking them to treat your brother's injury. With medicine, it will be twice the result with half the effort. I believe that in less than 3 months, your brother will be completely healed." Yushu continues to ask, "What if we can't find someone to treat his injury? How long will it take for him to recover?" The old doctor thinks for a moment and says, "If he is nursed well, at least half a year to a year. At the longest, it will take 3 to 5 years to recuperate. Moreover, he cannot easily use martial arts again." Yushu thinks for a moment and thanks him. She says, "Thank you, doctor. Please write me a prescription. I will send you back later and get the medicine on the way." After writing the prescription on the spot, Yushu inquires about the effects of the medicine. Jing Chen sits on the bed and looks in her direction. His ears move slightly and his eyes dim. Yushu personally sends the old doctor back to the medical hall. After getting the medicine, she buys some things on the street. By the time she returns to Kufu, it is already evening. After the 4 of them have dinner, Yushu asks Yu Xiaoxiu and Jing Chen to rest early. She and Xia Mingming light the candlesticks and sit side by side at the desk. She takes out a handful of copper coins, spreads out paper and ink, and begins to teach Xia Mingming the basics of the 6 lines. Xia Mingming already has a good foundation in Yiquan, even better than Yushu. Yushu does not spend much effort teaching her. After an hour of teaching her the basics of divinatory eyes, she lets her ponder on it herself. She tells Xia Mingming to sleep after the night watch, and then she goes back to her room and lies on the bed. Xia Mingming finally gets to learn the Yiquan that she has been dreaming of. She is so excited that she can't sleep. Yushu is so tired that she falls asleep as soon as she touches her pillow. She ignores the sound of copper coins being thrown outside. When she wakes up the next day, she opens her eyes and sees that the bed opposite her has not been moved. She puts on her clothes and goes out. She sees Xia Mingming sitting at the table with red eyes. She frowns and asks, "You didn't sleep last night?" Xia Mingming rubs her eyes and grasps the copper coins in her hand. She says to her excitedly, "Ashu, this is really interesting. I understand what you taught me yesterday. Can you continue to teach me something else?" Yushu says unhappily, "You go to sleep first. We will talk after you have a good rest." They took an overnight bus from the small town to Kaifeng Prefecture. Yesterday they stayed at the inn. Calculating the time, this girl has not slept for 2 nights. Xia Mingming purses her lips and says, "I don't want to sleep. Quickly teach me." Seeing that she does not listen to her advice, Yushu's face darkens. She says, "It is good to be diligent, but it is not good to be eager for quick success. To understand the 6 lines, the most important thing is to be quiet and calm. You must guard against arrogance and rashness. If you are like this, even if I teach you, you will not be able to use it. Then why should I waste my time to teach you? Don't learn." Xia Mingming's face changes when she hears this. She quickly stands up from the chair. She has sat for too long and her lower body is numb. She shakes her body and stands firm. She slowly moves towards the room and says pitifully, "I will go to sleep, okay? Why are you scaring me?" Chapter 141. After breakfast, Yushu asked the waiter to bring her to the kitchen at the back. She found a waiter who was free to boil the medicine she had bought for Jingchen yesterday. After it was done, she brought it back upstairs. Jingchen was lying on the couch in the living room. When he saw Yushu enter the door, he sat up. Yushu gave him a steaming bowl of medicine and asked Yu Xiaoxiu to move a chair to sit next to him and watch him drink the medicine. "Drink it while it's hot. Be careful not to burn your mouth." Nodding his head, Jingchen stirred the soup in the bowl with the spoon and drank it in one gulp. The strong taste of the medicine rushed into his mouth. "Is it bitter?" Yushu took the empty bowl and handed a towel to him to wipe his mouth. Jingchen shook his head. Yushu sniffed and smiled. "Liar, the smell of this medicine is bitter. Yesterday I saw a watermelon on the street. I will go out and buy one and we can eat it. Do you know what a watermelon is? It's this big. It has green skin and green clothes. The inside is red and there are black seeds. It tastes sweet." She turned her head to ask Yu Xiaoxiu, "Has Xiaoxiu eaten watermelon?" "No." Yu Xiaoxiu listened to Yushu's story and felt his mouth was dry. He scratched his head and said, "I have only seen people eat it." Yushu said, "Then I will go buy one now and ask the waiter to put it in the well. We can eat it when Mingming wakes up." Jingchen's eyes moved as he thought of something. He reached out and pulled Yushu's sleeve. Yushu habitually reached out and asked him with her eyes. Jingchen wrote on her palm, "You want to marry Miss Ya, right?" It was the same question from yesterday. After a night, it was brought up again by Jingchen. Yushu had a headache. She worded her words in her heart and said to Jingchen, "Did Xiaoxiu tell you that a man and a woman must marry after they have had physical contact?" Jingchen looked at Yu Xiaoxiu, who was standing awkwardly at the side, and nodded hesitantly. Yushu put on a straight face and lectured him in a serious manner. "Let me tell you, what he said is wrong. For a man and a woman to get married, they must first be in love with each other and both parties must be willing. Only then can we talk about marriage. Mingming and I don't have any feelings between a man and a woman, and neither do we have a matchmaker, so of course we can't get married. Now that I'm in the same room with her, it's because of the situation. The two of us are innocent. Even if there are some disrespectful actions, it's not because we're in love." Jingchen was confused for a moment and nodded. He did not really understand what Xiaoyu said, but he knew that she would not marry Miss Ya. Yushu saw Jingchen's eyebrows move and he smiled. He had delicate features and was so handsome that it dazzled people's eyes. She asked inexplicably, "What are you smiling at?" Jingchen's face was blank for a moment. Did he smile? "Oh, that's right." Yushu suddenly remembered and pointed a finger at Jingchen seriously. "In the future, other than my words, no matter what anyone else says to you, you must not believe them easily lest you get deceived. Do you understand?" Jingchen looked at her without blinking and confirmed the meaning of her words. He nodded obediently. Yu Xiaoxiu, who was hugging Kim Bao, secretly rolled his eyes. Don't think that he did not know that the someone else his sister was talking about was not him. Looking at Jingchen's docile look, Yushu felt an itch in her heart. She reached out and wanted to rub his head. Halfway through, she felt that it was inappropriate. No matter what, they were of the same generation. If Jingchen were to remember this, he would definitely fall out with her. Thus, she landed on his shoulder and patted, "It's good that you remember. You lie down and rest, I will go out and buy you good food." The four of them stayed in the inn for 5 days. After recovering their energy, Yushu found an escort agency in the city and inquired about the route to the capital. She paid 30 taels of silver as a deposit and hired a horse carriage to send them to the capital. After preparing their rations and clothes, they divined their fortune before leaving. The next morning they set off for the capital of the Da and dynasty and Ling city. Because of the trauma from their previous trip with the caravan, Yushu specially found an escort agency and paid a high price to escort them. The four of them set off, pretending to be close friends and family. There were 3 escorts with them, each carrying a sword on their back. One of them drove the carriage while the other 2 followed on horseback. Along the way, food and lodging as well as other expenses were all paid for by Yushu. The escorts of the escort agency were very experienced. Not only did they recognize the route, they were also able to find good restaurants and inns along the way. Yushu wanted to settle down in the capital as soon as possible, so they did not stop along the way. They traveled during the day and stayed at the inn at dusk. Finally, after half a month, they arrived at the capital region. Near the capital there were many cities and farms. On the way, the people they met were dressed differently from the people in the south. Their accents were straight and more lively than the Wu language. After traveling for half a day, they finally arrived outside the capital. It was the middle of August and it was scorching noon. As soon as the curtains were lifted, a gust of hot air rushed in. Yushu looked at the line of travelers and horses waiting to enter the city. She heard the escort say, "Mr. Yu, we have to get off the carriage before we can enter the city. Do you think you should get off first?" "All right." Yu Shu and Xia Mingming each carried their luggage and let Yu Xiaoxiu help Jing Chen get off the carriage. The escort who was driving the carriage drove to another place and parked the carriage. The remaining two followed behind Yu Shu and the rest, sending them into the city. Only then would their escort mission be considered complete and they would be able to collect the money. In front of the city gate, there was a 10-foot-long line. There was a hubbub of voices. Yu Shu looked up and saw a magnificent scene. The 3-foot-high wall was like a dragon lying on the ground. You could not see the head or the tail of the thing. On the top of the gate, there were 3 large red words, "Wan Xing Men." "It's so hot." Xia Mingming used one hand to fan her ear and the other to wipe the sweat off her forehead. She complained. Yu Shu took off the bamboo hat on her back and put it on her head. "Drink some water when it's hot." On the other side, Yu Xiaoxiu opened the water bag and gave it to Jing Chen. Seeing Jing Chen wave his hand, she took 2 big gulps to quench her thirst. Didn't they say that carriages are not allowed? Then how can they enter in a carriage?" Xia Mingming pointed to the front and asked. Yu Shu looked in the direction she was pointing and saw that the city guards had opened up a path for a carriage to pass. They were not afraid at all. There were people with special privileges everywhere, not to mention a place like the capital that was full of riches and honor. As expected, the escort said, "That must be the carriage of an official in Enling. They come and go frequently." The guards all recognized them and would not dare to obstruct them. Xia Mingming put down her hand resentfully and whispered. Their group of people queued for almost half an hour before they reached the front. The guards questioned them one by one about where they came from and why they came to the capital. When they heard that Yu Shu and the others said that they came to study the Dian dynasty, their attitude became better. They did not check their luggage and allowed them to pass. After walking a dozen steps forward and exiting the city gate, they suddenly saw a wide road from south to north. The road was wide enough for 3 carriages to travel side by side. The stone slabs were flat and there were no bumps under their feet. On both sides of the road, there were neatly erected buildings with double eaves and spikes. Most of them were shops of various colors. Their signboards fluttered in the wind, black, red, brown, and green. There were also restaurants with pots hanging down. The fragrance of the wine wafted through the streets. People came and went on the road. Their clothes were neat and their hair was neat. They looked generous and did not look like a dirty village. Standing at the foot of the emperor, if someone from a small city came, they would shrink back for no reason. Yu Xiaoxiu's eyes were wide open. He looked curiously left and right, his mouth slightly open. He was a complete country bumpkin. Xia Mingming and Jing Chen were much more restrained. The former had probably been here before, while the latter had his own temperament. Only Yu Shu looked at him curiously and turned to talk to the escorts. She dragged Yu Xiaoxiu, who could not move his feet, to a tea shop on the next street. She invited the 2 escorts to drink herbal tea and paid the remaining 20 taels of transportation. She asked around for directions in Anling City. "Second brother Lu, we want to find a place to stay. Where can we find a good and cheap shop in this city?" Along the way, Yu Shu calculated. After eating and drinking at Kaifeng Prefecture, plus the travel expenses, her 500 taels had almost been used up by half. The remaining 300 taels could be spent carefully. It would be best if she could use the money to buy a house. "I remember there is a Yunlai Inn on West 4th Street. It has food and accommodation, but the cheapest one night costs 1 tael of silver." The head of the escort who was asked by Yu Shu sighed. "Even the cheapest one costs 1 tael of silver?" Yu Xiaoxiu said with a distressed expression. Xia Mingming laughed at the side. "Where do you think this is? Can Anling City be compared to other places? A casual meal in a restaurant costs 20 to 30 taels of silver. A night stay only costs 1 tael of silver. Is that considered expensive?" Yu Xiaoxiu glanced at her. "It's not like I'm spending your money." Probably because the first impression was too bad, Yu Xiaoxiu could not see Xia Mingming as a girl. Thus he did not have much tolerance. "Yo, Luo." Xia Mingming turned her head away in embarrassment. If she did not have an accident on the ship and lost her belongings, This one tael would not be enough for her to give out as a reward. Jing Chen looked at the two of them. He picked up the teapot and refilled Yu Shu's cup with water. Yu Shu pretended not to hear Yu Xiaoxiu and Xia Mingming bickering. After chatting with the escort for a while, they got up to leave and went to meet up with the brothers who drove the carriage outside the city. Yu Shu and the others sat in the tea house and chatted. Mingming, what do you plan to do next? Yu Shu asked. Hearing this, Xia Mingming sat up straight and said defensively, of course I'm going with you guys. What, are you trying to get rid of me here? Yu Shu said, I mean, aren't you here for the examination? Don't you need to find a place to ask around? Yu Shu didn't understand the process of the Great Yen examination, but she thought that this kind of examination was similar to the imperial examinations, and there should be procedures. Xia Mingming's luggage was lost on the way, so it was impossible for him to wait empty-handed for the examination. Seeing that Yu Shu had no intention of abandoning her, Xia Mingming's expression softened a little. Then she frowned and said, I've lost my recommendation letter. I need to find a teacher to get it before I can register my name in the Directorate of Astronomy. If I don't get it before October, this trip will be in vain. Tomorrow we will go to the Purin Training Hall in the east of the city to ask around and see if we are going to visit the teacher's house in the city. Yu Shu pursed her lips. I have something to do tomorrow and can't accompany you. Lu Mingming was surprised and said, do you still have your recommendation letter? Lu Mingming was taken aback. Do you still have your recommendation letter? Not lost? Xia Mingming stared at her. Then why don't you come with me? Xia Mingming glared at him. Then why don't you come with me? Are you not going to take the examination? Chapter 142. After wandering around the southern part of the city for a while, Yu Shu and the others found the Yunlai Inn recommended by the escort. This inn was slightly old and not as spacious as the place they stayed at in Feng Prefecture. However, considering the price, Yu Shu was taken to the second floor of the back to look at the rooms. In the end, they chose 2 third-class rooms next to each other and paid 5 days' rent. Similarly, Yu Xiaoxiu and Jing Chen shared a room, while Yu Shu and Xia Mingming shared a room. There were 2 beds in the room and the layout was not particular. Fortunately, the bedding was clean and there was even a summer mat. The window was open on the back street, so it was relatively quiet. This was something that Yu Shu was very satisfied with. Putting down the luggage, Yu Shu walked to the basin rack to wash her hands. Xia Mingming had been holding back all the way. Seeing that there was no one around, he finally asked, You are so good at Yi Shui, why don't you take the Dian examination? Yu Shu shook off the water droplets on her hands and wiped them with a handkerchief. She turned her head and asked, Is my Yi Shui good? Of course it's good. Xia Mingming was a little excited. You know the art of 6 lines. I dare say that with this, you will definitely make a name for yourself in the Dian examination. Yu Shu smiled and said, It's true that I know the art of 6 lines, but have you ever seen me use it to tell the fortune of others? This. Xia Mingming thought about it carefully. It seemed that she really had not seen her use the art of 6 lines to tell the fortune of anyone. Even when Yu Shu was teaching her, she did not use the art of 6 lines to tell the fortune for her. But why? Seeing the confusion on Xia Mingming's face, Yu Shu immediately explained to her, My aptitude is not good. I can barely learn the art of 6 lines, so I can only tell the fortune for myself. It's not accurate for others. Xia Mingming's mouth was wide open. With a stunned expression, he blurted out, Isn't this a waste? Yu Shu snorted softly. She thought to herself, Don't be calculative with a child. Anyway, of course she has poor aptitude. So what if her aptitude is rotten? Who is in the way? She did not rely on this to make a living. Seeing the change in Yu Shu's expression, Xia Mingming realized that he had said something wrong. Blushing, he rubbed his hands and said, I didn't mean that. Don't be angry. I just wanted to say that it's a pity that you can't use the 6 lines. Yes, it's a pity. Of course, Yu Shu wouldn't get angry just because of one sentence. Xia Mingming was just being straightforward. Moreover, even Yu Shu herself felt that she had ruined the 6 Yao lines. However, she had no choice. Her horoscope was not reliable, so she could only use the 6 Yao lines to make up for it. Seeing that Yu Shu was not speaking, Xia Mingming thought that she was really angry. Feeling anxious, Xia Mingming sat down beside her, held her hand and said, Shu, don't feel bad. Aptitude and talent are born with it. It's not up to us to decide. Look at me, aren't I the same? I can read dreams but I can't use it at all. My 4th sister has always laughed at me for being a good-for-nothing since I was young, but I'm still the same. What's the big deal? They are just a little better than us when they are born. As she spoke, she began to sympathize with Yushu. She put one arm around Yushu's shoulder and said in a tough voice, "There are several subjects in the Great Yen examination. You can't use the 6 Yao lines, so don't go for the uncanny techniques. If you pass the other subjects, you will still have a chance to enter the Imperial Historian's Library. Alright, isn't there a Ji family in Yang City? I heard that there is a young lady in the Ji family who is very talented. 3 years ago, she was chosen to enter the Imperial Historian's Library only by relying on astrology. How's your feng shui? You don't know physiognomy, so what do you call it?" Seeing that Xia Mingming was talking energetically, Yushu poured herself a cup of tea to drink. The Great Yen examination that was held once every 3 years was indeed an opportunity for a carp to leap over the dragon's gate. At first, she had thought of taking the exam, but on second thought, she felt that it would be inappropriate. The Great Yen examination was organized by the Celestial Commissioner under the Imperial Decree and was linked to the Imperial Historian's Library. The top students of each subject would definitely be reviewed by the Celestial Commissioner before being selected to study in the Imperial Historian's Library. If she remembered correctly, the old master of the Ji family was currently holding a position in the Celestial Commissioner's office, and it wasn't a low position either. That Ji Xingxuan was a famous top student in the Imperial Historian's Library. As for her, her predecessor was a pitiful person who died in the Ji family's household. She had been chased out of the Ji family twice, and had almost replaced Ji Xingxuan as someone's concubine. It could be said that she and the Ji family had a deep hatred for each other. If she were to participate in the Great Yen examination, she would definitely spare no effort to fight for a ranking. She didn't dare to guarantee anything else, but at least in feng shui she would definitely enter the top 3. But what would happen after that? If the Ji family didn't find out, then it would be fine. But if they did, based on the Ji family's character, she didn't believe that they would let her wander. If they found out that something was wrong, they would definitely crush her to death in her infancy. She was afraid that when the time came she would be too busy supporting the Ji family. Not to mention studying, even finding a place to live would be a problem. Success wasn't something that could be achieved overnight. She was still too inexperienced. The Great Yen examination was a shortcut, but it wasn't suitable for her. Or rather, it wasn't suitable for her right now. In a situation where she couldn't protect herself, exposing herself prematurely would only bring her danger and obstacles. In comparison, the temptation of leaping through the dragon's gate wasn't enough for her to gamble. As a reference for this year's Great Yen examination, she had previously used the 6 lines to make a divination for herself several times. Each time there was danger hidden within the good fortune. This made her even more determined to not advance rashly. "Mingming, you don't need to comfort me. I won't go to this year's Great Yen examination." Yushu interrupted Xia Mingming's words. Her attitude was very firm. She removed the hand that was on her shoulder and placed it on the table. She patted it and said, "Prepare yourself well." Yushu got up and left the excited Xia Mingming behind. She went to her bag and took out a small abacus, a stack of banknotes and half a bag of silver fragments. She sat on the edge of the bed and calculated. The more she calculated, the more worried she became. Right now, she only had about 310 taels of silver left. 2 rooms in the inn cost 2 taels a day. The food expenses for the 4 of them would be 200 taels a day. 10 days of food and lodging would be 22 taels. In addition to the money for Jing Chen's medicine, they would have to live on the streets in 2 months. Xia Mingming followed Yushu to sit on the bed. After a moment of silence, she couldn't help but ask, "Shu, can you accompany me to Peiren Hall tomorrow?" Yushu fiddled with her abacus. Without raising her head, she said, "Didn't I say that I have something to do tomorrow? You can go by yourself. You're already a grown man. How can you get lost? Don't you dare to go to the capital alone? How come you've become a coward here?" She could take care of Xia Mingming and help him, but she didn't want to spoil and protect him. She didn't have the leisure and obligation to do so. Who's a coward? Xia Mingming was dissatisfied and said, "I want to bring you to see the world. Peiren Hall is a must-visit place for those who come to the capital. If you're lucky, you can meet a great master there. What urgent matter do you have to do?" Yushu said, "I want to see if there are any houses for sale in the city. I want to find a place to stay as soon as possible. It's a waste of money to stay in an inn. It's not cheap to eat outside." Xia Mingming was surprised. "You want to buy a house?" "Yes, it's not a big one. 2 rooms are enough. There were 4 of them and the place was too small. Just like the small courtyard where Chao Zixin lived in Yang City." Inadvertently thinking of that person, Yushu was slightly absent-minded. She only responded after Xia Mingming called her several times. Ashu Ashu? Ah, what did you just say? Yu Shu lowered her head and cleared the messy abacus in her hand. She thought that he had already returned to the Shui family and should be in the capital now. You just said that it's expensive to eat outside. Are you going to cook after buying a house? Let me tell you first, I don't know how to cook. I don't expect you to. Enling City was so big. They shouldn't be able to meet each other. Even if they met, there was nothing to say. After all, that day Yu Shu sighed. She would rather not see him again than feel awkward when they met again. Whether it was her brother Chao or Master Shui, she didn't know how to face him. Why are you sighing? Do you not have enough money? Xia Mingming asked with concern. After several times of Yu Xiaoxiu's unintentional ridicule, she was now very self-aware. She knew that she had to rely on Yu Shu to support her. Just save some money. Wait for me to think of a way to make money. Yu Shu sorted out the scattered banknotes. She took out the top banknote with a denomination of 10 taels. She took out a few pieces of silver and handed it to Xia Mingming. What is this for? Xia Mingming looked at it but didn't take it. Yu Shu smiled and said, Aren't you going out tomorrow? Are you going to walk? If it's too far, you can rent a carriage. But don't waste it. Buy some tools with the remaining money. You don't even have a compass now. Hearing that Yu Shu was so considerate of her, Xia Mingming's eyes became wet. She took the thin banknote. She wanted to say thank you, but she was afraid that it would be unreasonable. Just as she was feeling touched, she heard Yu Shu say, I'm not giving you money for free. I'll keep an account for you. You have to pay me back in the future. Don't forget to write me an IOU later so that you won't renege on your debt. Xia Mingming's face turned green. She said angrily, Pay me back. I'll pay you back 10 times. Yu Shu reached out and flicked her forehead with force. Wait until you have money. Xia Mingming cried out in pain. She covered her forehead and wanted to flick her hand back, but she didn't dare. She could only swallow her anger and pout her mouth. She stared at Yu Shu with her big eyes. Her interruption made Yu Shu forget the depression she felt when she thought of someone just now. She laughed and put the banknote away. She went next door to see if Yu Xiaoxiu and Jing Chen had finished packing. Then she asked them to go downstairs to eat together. They didn't put fish and meat on the table. They only ordered 4 bowls of soy sauce noodles. Yu Shu asked Yu Xiaoxiu to buy 6 sesame seed cakes from the opposite street. The 4 of them ate together. Jing Chen and Yu Xiaoxiu didn't complain at all. Although Xia Mingming was dissatisfied, she was too embarrassed to say it. Kim Bao was also dissatisfied with Xia Mingming. Yu Shu asked Yu Xiaoxiu to take half a sesame seed cake back to the room to feed it. Kim Bao had been fed a while ago. When it smelled the sesame seed cake, it turned around and raised its butt to face Yu Xiaoxiu, silently protesting. It was only after Yu Shu poked its forehead and warned it to be obedient. It trembled its ears and ate a small piece of sesame seed cake. Chapter 143. After a night of rest, early the next morning, Yu Shu woke up Xia Mingming and took Yu Xiaoxiu out of the house, leaving Jing Chen to rest in the inn. They separated at the street corner. Xia Mingming rented a car and went to the east of the city to find the Peiren Hall, while Yu Shu led Yu Xiaoxiu to wander around the unfamiliar streets. Sister, where can we find information about the house? Let's look around first. In ancient times, there were no real estate agents to find. They were unfamiliar with the people and the place in the capital. If they wanted to buy a house, they had to ask around first to avoid being cheated. The siblings walked around the nearby streets and found a tea house. They ordered 2 plates of snacks and a pot of iced chrysanthemum. The first floor of the tea house was crowded. A storyteller was telling a story with a big folding fan. The second floor was a private room, and there were only a few people going in and out of the stairs. After listening for a while, Yu Shu used the storyteller to talk to an old man at the next table. She went out this morning and deliberately combed her hair until it was smooth. There was no hair on her forehead, so she looked more mature. The older generation always liked mature young people. The old man heard that she was polite and looked kind, so he was happy to talk to her. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Yu Shu naturally led the topic to the houses. The old man's surname was Bai, and he was a local in the capital. When he heard that Yu Shu wanted to settle down here, he enthusiastically helped to give her advice. He told her about the prices of the land in the south and north of the city. Finally, he pointed her to Huixing Street in the west to ask around. There were many houses there, and many people were renting and selling them. Yu Shu thanked him and immediately led Yu Xiaoxiu to Huixing Street. It went smoothly. After asking around on the street, she heard that there were several houses renting and selling houses. She was also led to those houses by a warm-hearted aunt. There were more than a dozen alleys on Huixing Street, and most of the alleys were residential houses with single doors and courtyards. The houses were old, and many of the courtyard walls had traces of being rebuilt. Yushu originally thought that the price would be cheaper, but she didn't expect that after asking a few houses, the cheapest one would cost 150 taels of silver to obtain the title deed. The 2 houses that Yushu was interested in only rented and didn't sell, and it cost 8 taels of silver a month. Yushu and Yu Xiaoxiu both thought that it was expensive. They bought an empty house without furniture. If they bought more, they wouldn't even have money for food next month. As a last resort, Yushu and Yu Xiaoxiu changed another place. From the warm-hearted aunt, they found another street. They went to take a look, but it wasn't as clean as the houses on Huixing Street. At noon, they bought a basket of steamed buns on the street to eat. Because they had told the waiter to send food to Jing Chen's room, they weren't in a hurry to go back, so they walked to Huixing Street. They wanted to say that they could rent the house that cost 8 taels of silver a month first. It was better than wasting it by staying in an inn. Back on Huixing Street, Yushu wanted to find the 2 houses that they had seen before, but she was stopped by someone at the entrance of an alley. Little brother, the 2 little brothers in front, a slightly plump young man ran up and walked in front of Yushu. He said with a smile, "You were looking for a house to buy this morning, right?" Yushu nodded. They had wandered around the street for half a day in the morning, so it wasn't strange for people to hear that they were buying a house. "That's good. I have a courtyard here that was built just a few years ago. The place is quiet and there are plants in the courtyard. I think little brother looks like a scholar, so this house is perfect for you to live in." The man opened his mouth and praised himself. He wanted to entice Yushu to follow him to see the house. Yushu asked and found that it was on the street behind. Seeing that it was broad daylight, she wasn't afraid that he would do something bad, so she went with him. When they arrived, they knew that the fat man wasn't lying. This small house with a sihiyuan was indeed not bad. There was a house on the east, west, and north sides. There was also a kitchen in the corner of the courtyard. A row of fences surrounded a small circle of land. Although there were only some wild flowers and weeds growing inside without anyone taking care of it, it looked a bit bleak. It was rare to see a little bit of interest. At first glance, Yushu fell in love with this small courtyard. She carefully looked around inside and outside and found that there was no problem with feng shui. She turned to ask the owner of the house, "This small courtyard, how much are you willing to sell it for?" The fat landlord said reluctantly, "Well, someone in my family is sick and I am in a hurry to raise money for medicine. This house is originally only for rent and not for sale. If you can buy it now, I will only charge you 200 taels of silver." The price was not expensive. Compared with the house itself, it was considered cheap. If it wasn't in urgent need of money, it couldn't be sold for less than 300 taels of silver. This made Yushu very tempted. "Is the deed of the house and the land complete?" In the morning at the tea house, Yushu asked Mr. Bai about the procedures of buying a house in Enling City. She was afraid that she would meet a swindler. The fat landlord immediately took out the deed of the house and the land and handed it to her. "Here, I have it with me. I will take you to the magistrate's office and put your fingerprint on it. After you give me the money, this house is yours." Yushu had seen the deed of Zhao Hui's small courtyard and recognized the format. She saw that the deed in his hand was a few years old and didn't seem to be fake. Moreover, she had to go to the magistrate's office and pay the money last. She wasn't stupid. If she found out that he was cheating, she could just refuse to buy it. Yushu had an idea in her mind. She asked the landlord a few more questions and made an appointment with him to go to the magistrate's office tomorrow. The landlord was naturally overjoyed and happily sent them away. After the group of people left, a few women poked their heads out of the alley. They gathered together and whispered, pointing at the house that Yushu intended to buy. Their voices could be faintly heard, "Su Laolu has found a sucker this time. Yes, that haunted house is full of ghosts. No one would want it even if it was free. Those 2 foreigners?" Su Laolu lost money in gambling again. Yushu and Yu Xiaoxiu went to a nearby pharmacy to buy some medicine and then returned to the inn. The sky was still bright and Xia Mingming had not returned. In the guest room, Jing Qin sat in front of the window and watched Kim Bao licking his claws and combing his hair. When he heard footsteps outside the door, he got up and walked a few steps forward. Then he heard a knock on the door. Jing Qin opened the door. "We are back." Yushu and Yu Xiaoxiu entered the room and poured a cup of tea for each of them. Jing Qin sat opposite Yushu and gestured, "How is it?" Yushu said, Once I've chosen a place, I'll bring the money to the magistrate's office tomorrow to transfer the ownership. Later I'll buy a few more pieces of furniture and clean it up. In a few days we'll be able to move in. At that time you'll be living in one room. Mingming and I will be living in the other room. Jing Chen smiled and did not raise any objections. When he saw that Yushu's cup was empty, he took the initiative to refill the teapot for her. It wasn't time to eat yet, so the three of them sat in the room and busied themselves with their own things. Yu Xiaoxiu and Jin Bao hadn't seen each other for a day, so they were getting intimate with each other. Yushu took out an abacus, a pen and paper, and did some calculations for herself. She didn't find anything unusual. To be on the safe side, she used the 6 lines to do a divination for the purchase of a house. Jing Chen sat quietly and watched Yushu do the abacus. In the evening, Xia Mingming finally came back. She went to the room next door and looked gloomy the moment she entered. Yushu guessed that she must have had a bad start, so she teased her on purpose. Did you see any de master? She had heard from Xia Mingming that the Peiren tea house was a tea house for the traders who had come to the capital to take part in the Great Yen examination to exchange knowledge. To put it bluntly, it was a place for a group of gloomy quacks to chat and fart. In that kind of place, the most important thing was not whether one had the ability but having a mouth. With Xia Mingming's bad temper, Yushu had predicted last night that she wouldn't be able to get anything out of today's trip. Sure enough, Xia Mingming angrily sat down next to Yushu, slapped the table and angrily said, "Those snobbish bastards. I'm talking to them because I respect them, yet they still dare to put on airs in front of me. Who do they think they are? I've been learning Yi since I was 4 years old. I can even recite the 8 trigrams backwards, unlike those half-baked people. If I hadn't lost my recommendation letter, I wouldn't have paid attention to them." The more Xia Mingming said, the angrier she got. Her saliva flew out. She grabbed the teacup in Yushu's hand and gulped it down. Then she slammed the teacup on the table, making a loud noise. Yu Xiaoxiu looked at Yushu. Jing Chen looked at Yushu. Yushu held back her laughter. After she vented her anger, she stood up as if nothing had happened. "You must be hungry. I will go downstairs to see if there is anything to eat." Yu Xiaoxiu also stood up. "I will go with you." Jing Chen also wanted to go, but he got up too late. Yu Xiaoxiu had already dragged Yushu out of sight. He had to sit back down. Xia Mingming puffed up her red cheeks. She couldn't find anyone to talk to, so she glared at Jing Chen. Jing Chen looked back at her innocently. It was hard to get angry with his handsome face. After a while, Xia Mingming felt embarrassed. She pushed the empty teacup in her hand forward and ran out of the room with her head down. She whispered, "What a waste of a good appearance. Unfortunately, he is dumb and stupid. He is a freeloader." Jing Chen turned his head and looked at the figure who disappeared at the door. He closed his eyes and slowly clenched his fists on the table. His knuckles made a crisp sound and then he loosened his fists. No matter how Xia Mingming begged at night, Yushu didn't agree to go to the training hall with her. She kicked her out early the next morning. It wasn't that Yushu was purposely making things difficult for her. From a certain perspective, Yushu was doing this for Xia Mingming's sake. She wanted to use this rare opportunity to grind down her sharpness, to let her eat dust a few times so that she would understand the ways of the world. As soon as Xia Mingming left, Yushu planned to go out to do business, but before she left, Jing Chen expressed that he wanted to go with her. Yushu thought that it wasn't far. If Jing Chen was really tired on the way, they could go back by carriage. So she asked Yu Xiaoxiu to stay in the inn. She bowed and went out with Jing Chen. When the two arrived at Huixing Street, Fatty Su was already waiting for them at the place where they agreed to meet yesterday. When he saw Yushu appeared on time, he smiled and greeted her. Originally, Yushu planned to go directly to the government office to do the formalities. But since Jing Chen came along, it didn't matter. Yushu let Fatty Su lead Jing Chen to see the house first. He will be one of the tenants in the future. When Fatty Su heard that Yushu wanted to bring Jing Chen to see the house, he looked at Jing Chen. He thought that this person has an extraordinary temperament and asked, "This is?" Yushu said, "He is my brother. We will live together in the future." Chapter 144. It was the same house as yesterday. Fatty Su unlocked the door and stepped aside to let Yushu and Jing Yu in. "Let's go in first." Jing Yu followed behind them. Yushu led Jing Chen around the small courtyard. She pointed at the small fence against the wall and told him in a low voice that he could plant some peppers and coriander at the back of the fence. Jing Chen did not know what peppers and coriander were, but he was happy that Yushu was willing to discuss it with him. The layout of the house was similar to that of a Sihiyuan. There were 3 rooms in the house. The one in the north was large, with a living room and a bedroom. The other 2 rooms were about the same size. One faced the sun while the other faced the shade. There was a flight of steps in front of each door. Yushu tugged at Jing Chen's sleeve and led him to the room facing the east. As she pushed the door open, she said to him, "You can stay in this room. Get some sun." As soon as the door opened, Yushu took a step in. Jing Chen followed closely behind her. He felt a wave of damp air that made him very uncomfortable. He stood at the door and looked inside curiously. The house was empty. Apart from a table by the window, there was nothing else. He looked up and saw that the house was 80% new. Jing Chen frowned when his gaze fell on the beam of the house. "What's wrong? It's not a small place, is it?" Yushu turned around to ask Jing Chen. However, he grabbed her hand and wrote on her palm with his back facing Fatty Su, "Xiaoyu, this house isn't good." Looking at her palm, Yushu looked at him suspiciously. "What's not good? I've seen it before. There's nothing wrong with this house." Jing Chen hesitated for a moment before writing on her palm, "I can't say. I just feel that this house is not good. It makes me uncomfortable." What kind of reason was that? Yushu was about to laugh, but when she saw Jing Chen's serious expression, a thought flashed through her mind. She suddenly remembered that when Jing Chen had parted with her in Yang City, he had once said that he had been sensitive since he was young and could sense that others had caused trouble because of him. In other words, Jing Chen's sixth sense was extremely accurate. Even if he had lost his memories, his instincts were still there. Just like that night on the ship, when Jing Chen had used his sword to send the head of the pirates flying at the critical moment. Now that he said that this place made him uncomfortable, there was most likely something wrong with this house. The expression on Yushu's face changed slightly as she felt suspicious. Then she heard Fatty Su's urging voice from the courtyard, "Young Master Yu, what are you guys whispering about? Have you chosen the house yet? Let's hurry to the magistrate's office. If we're late, we'll have lunch. We'll have to wait until the afternoon." Yushu's mind spun a few times. She gave Jing Chen a look that told him to calm down. She grabbed his wrist through her sleeves and pulled him towards Fatty Su. She frowned and said coldly, "I'm not buying any more." After saying that, he pulled Jing Chen and walked out. Fatty Su was stunned for a moment and hurriedly said, "Wait." Crimson 3 steps appeared in front of them and blocked their way. He said angrily, "Didn't we already agree? Why did you change your mind at the last minute? I've already shown you my house. Little brother, you shouldn't go back on your word, right?" He was angry, but Yushu was even fiercer. She pointed at him and said, "There's a killer in your house and you lied to me first. I'm already forgiving you by not reporting you to the authorities." Fatty Su's expression immediately became weak. He rolled his eyes and forced himself to maintain his imposing manner. "Don't talk nonsense. How is my house dangerous?" Yushu was initially trying to trick him. Seeing that his face was even more convinced, she became angry. She was originally a beginner, but now she couldn't even see through feng shui. If she really bought this haunted house for 200 taels of silver, she would lose all her face. Jing Chen sensed that Yushu was angry. He worriedly raised his hand and gently placed it on her narrow shoulder. This light touch made Yushu regain her rationality and quickly calm down. "I'll tell you the truth. My brother and I are beginners who came to take the Great Yen examination. My brother specializes in feng shui. Whether your house is dangerous or not, we can tell at a glance. You still want to deny it? Why don't we go to the magistrate's office to judge? Let's see if you'll be punished with a board." Yushu didn't back down and continued to pursue the matter. Fatty Su had a guilty conscience, so when he heard this, his face fell. He hastily raised his hands and bowed. Don't. I'm not deliberately deceiving you. It's just that you didn't ask, so I didn't tell you. Brother Yu, please don't argue with me. I won't sell this house, okay? Do you think you won't sell it if you don't want to?" Yushu put on an unforgiving expression and pointed at the house facing the sun. "Tell me clearly what's going on with that house?" As soon as this matter was brought up, Fatty Su repeatedly sighed. If he didn't explain himself clearly, Yushu didn't plan on letting him go. She took a few steps back, lifted the hem of her clothes and squatted down in the sun. She said in a muffled voice, "It's all my bad luck. My father destroyed the old walls to build a new house for me to marry a wife. Not even a year after the house was built, he passed away and I didn't manage to marry a wife. I saw that there were a few families nearby who were living quite well off rent, so I thought it would be a source of income. So I moved this house out and moved it to live with a few friends. Unfortunately, during the imperial examinations that year, a scholar came to the capital with a child and rented my house. He lived there for half a year. After the examinations were over and the results were released, he failed. He couldn't take it anymore and hung himself in the house. At this point he took a deep breath and pointed at the house facing the sun without raising his head. It's that house. The scholar used it as a study. Since someone died in the house, no one was willing to rent my house anymore. I couldn't earn money from an empty house, so I moved back here. Who would have thought that after a few days I started to get sick? At first it was just a cold and cough, but later on, ulcers started to appear on my back. Even after applying medicine, it didn't help. I started to feel that something was wrong, so I spent money to hire a doctor to take a look. His tone became heavy. Only then did I know that the scholar died in the house due to resentment. The yin qi was too strong, and my small courtyard didn't have a foundation, so it couldn't contain the resentment. Naturally, it was reflected on me. Yushu suddenly felt a chill at the back of her neck, and her shoulder was grabbed. She turned around and saw Jing Chen's worried gaze. She calmed herself down and shook her head, indicating that she was fine. She had heard about this haunted house from Taoist Qing Zheng. She wasn't sure if it was related to ghosts or gods, but the key was that the yin and yang qi were not in harmony, so there was evil energy that hindered the feng shui. If that's the case, why didn't you find a feng shui master to help you? Instead you built a house and harmed others. Yushu asked. Fatty Su smiled bitterly. Do you think I didn't want to? I originally wanted to ask the feng shui master to remove the yin qi in the house and change the feng shui so that it would be easier to rent in the future. But he asked for 100 taels. I didn't have that much money, so I looked for a few more feng shui masters, but they couldn't pay less than this amount. I had to give up. I also don't want to harm others, so in the past few years my house has been left empty. Yushu sneered. I'm afraid it's not that you don't want to harm others, but because of your haunted house's reputation, no one is willing to rent it. Now that she thought about it, yesterday the enthusiastic auntie brought her around Huixing Street. When they passed by this alley, she didn't even mention that this house was for sale. She probably knew that this was a haunted house, so she deliberately avoided it. Fatty Su dryly laughed and said, Younger brother I really didn't mean to lie to you. This residence has been empty for a few years now, so logically speaking, if there's anything unclean, it should have been dried by now. Who would have thought that this younger brother of yours is an expert and was able to see through it with a single glance? I deserve my bad luck for getting involved in this matter. Yushu glanced at him and pulled Jing Qin over. Doesn't this mean that we've earned 150 taels? Isn't it worth celebrating? Jing Qin nodded, then wrote on the table, Xiaoyu is very capable. You're the capable one, Yushu purposely said in a sour tone. One look and you can tell that there's a problem. For a mediocre person like me, I'll never have this kind of ability. Jing Qin, did you know that you were amazing in the past? You're skilled in martial arts and you know how to use formations. You can tell who's going to be in trouble with just one look. If I didn't have a master, I would definitely ask you to teach me. I would ask you to teach me. Chapter 145. After lunch, Yushu originally planned to let Jing Qin go back to the inn first, while she went to the street to buy some necessities to change the feng shui of the haunted house. Jing Qin insisted on going with her. Seeing that he was in good spirits today, Yushu agreed. They asked for directions and found a small shop. Yushu bought a bagua mirror, a small tripod, a handful of incense, a circle of red thread and other miscellaneous items. She also found a small bag of old glutinous rice in a grain shop. The total cost was less than 20 taels of silver. Back to the haunted house, Yushu took the small bag of glutinous rice and sprinkled it in front of the doors and windows of the 3 rooms. She tied the bagua mirror with a red string and hung it in front of the door of the east room, which was the room where the scholar was hanged. She dug half a cauldron of soil in the corner of the yard and added a handful of incense. She smoked the incense and only placed it in front of the door of the west room. Qing Zheng told her many ways to deal with a haunted house. It was not difficult to deal with a house like this that was only full of yin qi and had no bloody light. The old glutinous rice could drive away evil spirits, and the bagua mirror could eliminate yin. As for the incense, it was not for the dead but for the Lord of the Earth. Tomorrow she would add a bath of Yuanyang boy's urine and bury the tripod under the house. It could be used to guard the house and restore the previous feng shui. Although this was the first time she changed the feng shui of a house, she was very sure that it would succeed. Otherwise she would not have bought it in one go. It was not because she was confident in herself, but in Qing Zheng. Basically, Everything the old man taught her was reliable. Moreover, there was Jing Chen as a censor. She would know whether it was successful or not. Yushu was very relieved. After finishing all this, she packed up and was about to leave with Jing Chen. Jing Chen gestured with his hand. Is this enough? Yushu smiled. Not yet. I have to bring Xiaoxiu here tomorrow. Jing Chen was confused. Yushu didn't want to tell him that Yu Xiaoxiu had soaked in virgin urine, so she just laughed it off and didn't explain. The two of them returned to the inn. When Yu Xiaoxiu heard that Yushu had bought a new house, he couldn't wait to see it. However, it was already late, so he could only wait until the next day. Xia Mingming came back late just like yesterday. She didn't throw a tantrum like yesterday, but her complexion was even worse than yesterday. She silently ate her dinner and went next door alone. Xiaoxiu Jing Chen, go to bed early. I'll wake you up early tomorrow. Yushu followed Xia Mingming back to the room. As soon as she entered the room, she heard the sound of crying. She closed the door behind her and walked into the cubicle. She saw Xia Mingming lying on the bed crying. Yushu got closer and clearly heard his choked sobs. Dad, I want to go home. In fact, the fact that Xia Mingming could hold it in until now to act up had already exceeded Yushu's expectations. As a delicate young lady who had traveled to the capital alone, she had experienced many life and death situations along the way and suffered many hardships, but she had never regretted leaving home. She was determined to achieve her goals, and it was quite unexpected that she could do this. However, it was funny. Compared to physical suffering and mental shock, what could destroy a person's ambition was often a sneer, a taunt, or a supercilious look. Yushu could roughly imagine how Xia Mingming was treated at home. Although she called herself a waste, she had a pampered body and a naive and willful temper. How could she not be pampered and raised without anyone's care? In a place like Parent Training Hall, there were many people who stepped on the high and flattered the low. Xia Mingming had no one to rely on and refused to submit, so how could she not be looked down upon and not be pushed aside? The fickleness of human nature. This was the first time this young lady had personally experienced it. Yushu secretly sighed and sat next to her. She patted her back and said, "Today I got a bargain and saved some money. If you want to go home, I'll find an escort agency to send you back." Xia Mingming's crying suddenly stopped. She took a deep breath and turned her head. Her red eyes looked at Yushu pitifully. "Why are you so good to me? How have I been good to you?" Yushu asked back. Xia Mingming wiped her tears and sat up. She stretched out her fingers and counted. "You saved me on the boat. You didn't leave me behind when we were escaping. You took care of me in the forest. You even took me to the capital and taught me the art of 6 lines. Now you're even willing to pay to send me home. Aren't you good enough to me?" Xia Mingming's beautiful little face was full of gratitude, dependence, and even a trace of admiration. Yushu looked at her for a while and suddenly said, "Do you want to hear the truth?" "The truth?" Yushu got up from the bed and crossed her arms. She looked down at her with a slightly cold expression. "On the boat, I did it to protect myself and saved your life. I took care of you in the forest and took you with me because I pitied you. I taught you the art of 6 lines on a whim. As for sending you home now, it's because I feel that you won't be able to pass the Dian exam. How many good people do you think there are in this world? If it weren't for the fact that you're a young lady from a big family and can repay me in the future, why should I help you when you're not related to me?" Hearing Yushu's cold words, Xia Mingming's beautiful eyes were instantly filled with tears again. She looked at Yushu in disbelief and her teeth were about to break her lips. "What, you can't stand this little bit of harsh words?" Yushu sneered, "I despise girls like you who only know how to cry the most. If you can't stand being wronged, you learn to be successful. You can't even get a recommendation letter, and you still dare to talk nonsense about passing the Dian exam. How ridiculous. If I were you, I would have gone home with my tail between my legs. How could I stay here so shamelessly?" You. Xia Mingming was so angry at Yushu that her whole body was trembling. Seeing her disdainful eyes, her face turned green and red, and her heart suddenly burst into flames. Forgetting her sadness, she gritted her teeth and sat up from the bed. Stiffening her neck, she growled at Yushu, "If you want to force me to leave, then I won't leave. I will get a recommendation letter and pass the Dian exam. At that time, let's see if you still dare to look down on me. Just you wait." Yushu raised her hand to wipe the spittle off her face and calmly said, "Then I'll wait and see." Humph. Xia Mingming sat back on the bed and turned his head away from Yushu, to sulk by himself. Yushu pursed her lips and turned to go to sleep. The next morning at breakfast, Yu Xiaoxiu and Jing Chen noticed something was wrong. Xia Mingming, who usually liked to sit next to Yushu, was sitting furthest from Yushu today. During breakfast, not only did he not attentively put food or soup for Yushu, he did not even take the initiative to say a word. After eating, he put his bowl down on the table. "I'm full, I'm leaving. Be careful on the road," Yushu unhurriedly reminded him. Walking to the door, Yan Mingming paused and quickened his pace to leave. Yu Xiaoxiu was puzzled and nudged Yushu with his elbow. "What's wrong with her? Did you sleep well last night?" Yushu made up a story. "Hurry up and eat. Let's leave early. It's going to rain at noon." Yu Xiaoxiu was concerned about his new home, so he did not ask any more questions. Jingchen followed Yushu for the whole day yesterday. Yushu was afraid that he would be tired, so she did not want him to go with her. Jingchen did not object and stayed with Kim Bao at the inn. Yushu walked with Yu Xiaoxiu to the haunted house on Huixing Street. There were people in the alley during the day. Some of them saw her buying the house 2 days ago. When they saw Yushu unlocking the door, they knew that the haunted house had been sold. Only then did someone come up to talk to them. Yushu greeted them generously and said that the house would be moved after a while. The aunties in the neighborhood were busybodies. After a few words, they vaguely mentioned that the house was not good. Although it was hindsight, Yushu still thanked them and let them go. She borrowed a hoe and shovel from the new neighbor and dragged Yu Xiaoxiu, who could not help but poke his head into the yard, into the house. She closed the door tightly and pulled him to the door of the west house. The incense that was burned yesterday had turned into ashes in the tripod. Yushu picked up the small tripod and handed it to Yu Xiaoxiu. She asked him to take it to the corner of the wall and urinate in it. Yu Xiaoxiu blushed and stared blankly. "What are you doing?" "Don't be shy. I told you to go." "I won't look. Go." Yushu slapped him on the back. Yu Xiaoxiu reluctantly took the tripod and left. The yard was made of rammed earth, but it was firm and flat. Yushu chose a position with a southwest wind. She used a hoe to dig a hole in the corner of the wall and asked Yu Xiaoxiu to put the tripod with the boy's urine in it. She used a shovel to fill the hole and covered it with the sack of rice from yesterday. The job was done. The house would be empty for 3 days. After dispelling the evil spirits, they could add more furniture. "Older sister, are you creating feng shui?" Yu Xiaoxiu had learned Yi before. Although he didn't understand feng shui, he could see some of the tricks. As for Yushu's remarkable abilities, he was not surprised at all. Yushu was worried that if she told him that someone had died in this house, the child would be afraid. If he moved in and couldn't sleep at night, it would be bad, so she lied and said yes. Yushu led Yu Xiaoxiu to look at each room. The glutinous rice that was taken away yesterday was not touched and was waiting for Yu Xiaoxiu. When Xiu felt that it was fresh enough, she took him away and returned the hoe and shovel to the neighbor. While the sky was not overcast, they strolled around Huixing Street to familiarize themselves with the environment. Then they returned to Yunlai. Xia Mingming did not come back for lunch. Yushu, Yu Xiaoxiu and Jingchen ate mixed biscuits downstairs. Halfway through the meal, it began to rain outside. In the afternoon, there was nothing to do, so Yushu took the abacus to Yu Xiaoxiu's room and taught him how to calculate beads. Jingchen watched from the side. Yu Xiaoxiu had some talent in learning. Yushu taught him step by step how to calculate 3 times 9 twice, and he was able to calculate it. Yushu firmly believed that practice makes perfect, and only then can one be flexible. She did not let him memorize the formula of calculation by the abacus. However, under Yu Xiaoxiu's request, she still found a pen and paper to write it down for him. Yu Xiaoxiu looked at Yushu's dog crawl on the paper, which was even worse than when she was in Yang City. He said with a face full of disgust, "Can't you write it more neatly?" Yushu stretched out her hand and knocked his head. "It's good enough that I wrote it for you. Who can read what you write clearly? Open your eyes wider and look at it." The siblings bickered. Jingchen silently picked up the brush that Yushu had thrown aside. He dipped it in ink, rolled up his sleeves and lowered his head to write on a clean piece of paper. Yu Xiaoxiu was the first to notice Jingchen's action. He leaned over the table and looked at the paper. He saw that half of the paper was black and white, with a silkworm's head and a goose's tail. It was straight and elegant. It did not look like a regular script, nor did it look like a song. Instead, it looked simple and elegant. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Brother Jing, your handwriting is really beautiful. What style is this?" Jing Chen's brush stopped, shook his head and continued to write. "What nonsense are you asking?" Yushu knocked Yu Xiaoxiu's head again. She rested her chin on her hand and admired Jing Chen's handwriting. When he passed the formula to her, she checked that there was no mistake. She found a problem. The ugly character that she had written was still in Yu Xiaoxiu's hand. How did Jingchen memorize it? Jingchen, do you also know how to use the abacus? Did he remember something? Jingchen shook his head. Yu Shu said, then how did you memorize it? She paused and said with a strange expression, did you memorize it after listening to me teach Xiaoxiu? Jingchen tilted his head and looked at her. His expression seemed to say, is there something wrong? Yu Shu's eyes were red with jealousy. Although the formula was not difficult, there were a lot of numbers in it. For a person who did not know how to use the abacus, it was not something that could be memorized in a short period of time, unless he understood it thoroughly. This guy's comprehension was too good. Yu Shu sighed. For the first time in a long time, she clearly realized that Jingchen had only lost his memory and not become stupid. Chapter 146. Because of Jingchen's performance, Yu Shu was too embarrassed to ask him to sit in again. So she taught him and Yu Xiaoxiu together. The three of them spent the whole afternoon around an abacus. Jingchen understood it immediately. By the time Xia Mingming walked in from the outside with an umbrella, he was already able to calculate the abacus correctly. On the other hand, Yu Xiaoxiu, who shared the abacus with him, was several steps behind him. I'm back. Xia Mingming's face was still sullen, but she didn't deliberately ignore him like she did in the morning. She greeted him in a muffled voice. Yu Shu looked at the umbrella in her hand and thought that this girl wasn't stupid. She didn't get wet in the rain and still bought an umbrella. Xia Mingming quickly glanced at Yu Shu and sat down at the empty seat at the table. She looked at Yu Xiaoxiu, who was working on the abacus, and picked up the paper on which Jingchen had memorized the abacus. She looked at it and said in surprise, this is ancient script? Who wrote it? Her eyes skipped from Yu Shu to Yu Xiaoxiu's face and finally fell on Jingchen's face. She asked in surprise, you wrote it? Why do you know how to write ancient script? She had seen Yu Shu's dog crawl calligraphy many times. The strength of the writing didn't seem like it could be written by someone of Yu Xiaoxiu's age. Thinking about it, it could only be Jingchen. In the face of this question, Jingchen did not respond. She neither nodded nor shook her head. Just as Xia Mingming was about to ask again, Yu Shu pulled the paper out of her hand and angrily interrupted, why not? I know how to write. All right, I'm hungry. Let's go downstairs and eat. Then she urged the three of them to go downstairs. She walked at the back and folded the words written by Jingchen and stuffed them into her arms. It was not difficult for Yu Shu to find out that Jingchen's handwriting was good because of Xia Mingming's shout just now. Maybe it would reveal his origin. Yu Shu didn't intend to let Xia Mingming know Jingchen's origin, including the fact that he was actually a Taoist. It had nothing to do with trust. She just felt that the fewer people knew about Jingchen, the better. Therefore, Xia Mingming knew that Yu Shu knew Jingchen before in Feng Mansion, but he couldn't get any information from Yu Shu. He only knew that they were old friends. After the meal, the four of them returned to their respective rooms. Xia Mingming walked behind Yu Shu and entered the house. Once the door was closed, he could not help but ask, who exactly is Jingchen? Where did Jingchen come from? Yu Shu pretended to be deaf and mute, trying to bluff her way through like before. However, Xia Mingming was not so easy to fool this time. He took a few steps forward and blocked her way. Don't play dumb with me. Who exactly is Jingchen? He knows how to write ancient script. As far as I know, only the Taoist priest from Longhu Mountain can use this script. Is he from Longhu Mountain? No, he is a Taoist priest? Xia Mingming was stunned by his own guess. If Jingchen was really a Taoist priest from Longhu Mountain, combined with his current experience, the situation was not trivial. Hearing Xia Mingming's accurate guess, Yu Shu scolded in her heart, why didn't I see her so smart usually? She replied, how could it be? He is from Jintong. Don't fool me. Xia Mingming was a little excited and said, do you know that if he is really a Taoist priest from Longhu Mountain, you should immediately send a letter to his sect and ask someone to pick him up. Send him to the Taoist temple in the capital first, find someone to treat his wounds and wait for his sect to pick him up. What do you mean by keeping him here? When his sect comes to find him and finds out that you have hidden him, you will get yourself into trouble, do you know that? Xia Mingming firmly believed that Jingchen was a Taoist priest from Longhu Mountain, and subconsciously thought that Yu Shu's sheltering of Jingchen was her selfishness. The people of this dynasty had a deep-rooted respect for Taoists, especially for Taoists who came from a treasured place like Mount Longhu. From Xia Mingming's point of view, Yu Shu's failure to report what she knew was a form of disrespect and neglect. If others found out about it, it would be disastrous. Yu Shu was annoyed by her argument. If she could send Jing Chen back, did she think she didn't want to? But now she didn't even know why Jing Chen was plotted against. If she pushed him out rashly, it might put him in danger again. Moreover, with Jing Chen's inexplicable constitution, how could she just push him to an outsider? Thinking of this, Yu Shu pulled a long face and said to Xia Mingming gloomily, "I know better than you what kind of person Jing Chen is. I don't need you to tell me what to do. Just take care of yourself and don't try to catch mice." Hearing this, Xia Mingming's face turned red with anger, and her chest heaved up and down. She said in a low voice, "You treat my good intentions as ill intent. Do what you want, I don't care." After saying this, she ran into the house and covered herself with the quilt. Yu Shu looked into the house helplessly. Of course, she knew that Xia Mingming was thinking for her, but there were some things that she couldn't say clearly to her. This was the only way she could stop her from asking too much. Xia Mingming lay on the bed, grabbing the pillow angrily and feeling wronged. Ashu provoked her yesterday. Today she was outside for a whole day. She finally came to her senses and knew that Ashu was doing it for her own good. When she came back tonight, she wanted to reconcile with Ashu, but who would have thought that it would make things even more awkward? It's all that Jing Chen's fault. At breakfast the next day, Xia Mingming became taciturn again. She ignored everyone except Jing Chen, who was stared at by her for no reason. Yu Xiaoxiu looked at her strangely. After Xia Mingming left, he asked Jing Chen, "Brother Jing? How did you offend her?" Jing Chen shook his head blankly. He didn't remember any communication between him and Xia Mingming. After a night, Yu Shu's mood wasn't bad. After breakfast she took Yu Xiaoxiu out. As usual, she left Kim Bao to accompany Jing Chen. There was also an abacus to relieve his boredom. When they reached the street, Yu Xiaoxiu saw Yu Shu leading him in the opposite direction of Huixing Street. He asked, "Where are we going?" "To find a way to make money." Yu Shu's idea was very simple. There must be a place similar to Yiyang City's Wanxiang Street in the capital. There were many people who went there to seek fortune-telling. She planned to find a place and set up a fortune-telling stall to tell people's horoscope. Starting from a business that didn't require any capital, she could at least take care of food and clothing first. Setting up a fortune-telling stall was not just to make a living. After the incident of the merchant ship being robbed, Yu Shu found that there were many shortcomings in her law of time of calamity. She needed a lot of experience to enrich it. For example, the flood disaster didn't just refer to drowning or sinking the ship. There were other possibilities. Practice was the fastest way to accumulate experience. Learning was to review the old and learn the new. The emphasis was on consolidation. Yu Shu had always been very clear that it was easy to learn from Qing Zheng. From the beginning she took a shortcut. Her starting point was much higher than others, but her foundation was also weaker than others. For example, the day before yesterday she was almost cheated when she bought a house. It was because her foundation wasn't solid. Otherwise she could have found something wrong with some clues. She swallowed a lot of knowledge without digesting it. If she kept eating, it would be useless. It rained yesterday, so it was very cool today. Yu Shu and Yu Xiaoxiu asked along the way. After walking for an hour, they found a place called Autumn Osmanthus Square, in the south of the city. It was one of the trading shops and traders in Anling City. Trading shops of various sizes were located on 3 streets nearby. At first glance, there were many patterns of 8 diagrams in yin-yang. There was a memorial arch in the middle of the street. The uneven buildings were a little old and the bricks and tiles were a little old. This place was not as neat as Yiyang City's Wanxiang Street, but there were many passers-by. In addition to the trading shops, there were restaurants, tea houses and gambling houses on the street. On both sides of the street, there was no lack of people who set up stalls to do fortune-telling. There were also some peddlers who sold small items. As long as they took a second glance at them, they would surround them. There were too many people, so Yu Shu protected her money bag and held Yu Xiaoxiu's hand tightly. She was afraid that they would get lost. By the roadside there were a few stalls that sold soybean flour cakes. The cakes were coated with frosting and smelled fragrant and sweet. They were palm-sized and sold for 10 copper coins each, which wasn't considered expensive. Yu Shu had someone pack up 3 pieces and shared one with Yu Xiaoxiu. She planned to bring the other 2 back for Jing Chen and Xia Mingming to try. In order to find out the market, Yu Shu visited almost all the trading shops on the street. Generally, the feng shui ornaments were 30 to 50% more expensive than in Yiyang. It was not surprising. The population of the capital was 10 times that of Yiyang, so there were more rich people. On the street, she pretended to be a customer seeking fortune-telling. She asked a few stalls and didn't hesitate to spend 1 tael to find out the standard of the traders here. The result made Yu Shu feel rather complicated. There were people who put up flags on the street. There were people who were just there to make up the numbers, but there were also people with real skills. In terms of standard, they were almost the same as the old man who told her fortune when she and Zhao Hui went to the Three Purities meeting. The Master Yi, who was respected in Yang City, was only at the level of a street fortune teller. It was really ironic. On the other hand, this was indeed the capital. It was a place where traders from all over the world gathered. There were many talented people, and those who wanted to fight for a position here were not ordinary people. Thinking back to the past, Qingyang and Yunhua exchanged sons. Their names shook the capital, and no one could surpass them in 100 years. Even the emperor had to treat them with courtesy. How amazing and incomparably glorious they must be. Yu Shu looked at the endless stream of people on the street. Hearing the voices of people asking for fortune and smelling the faint fragrance of sandalwood, she suddenly felt her blood boil. She was not willing to be mediocre in this life. Yu Xiaoxiu looked at Yu Shu, whose eyes were shining for some reason. He only felt that his sister suddenly became spirited. Just as he was about to ask, he was pulled by Yu Shu. Xiaoxiu, let's go. Let's go back. She wanted to go back and properly plan how to put down roots in this autumn osmanthus lane and take her first step in a solid manner. The siblings turned around and entered the alley behind them. Not long after they left, two horses entered the street one after the other. Wherever they passed, the passers-by would make way for them. When they turned their heads to look, they saw the two young masters on the horses. One was handsome and the other was as beautiful as jade. They were both dragons and phoenixes among men. The people on the horses talked as if there was no one around. You said you would bring me here to drink good wine. Is this the place? On the carmine horse, the young man dressed in a golden pine green robe had a faint smile on his face. His voice was unhurried, and the hair on his forehead covered a small scar that was half an inch long. Chapter 147. Late at night, in the same room, Xia Mingming has already fallen asleep. An oil lamp is lit in the outer room, and Yu Shu is still doing her calculations on the table. Since escaping from the gorge a month ago and arriving at Anling City after several twists and turns, Yu Shu hasn't had the chance to sort out the inspiration she got from the disaster on the ship. Yu Shu has always been very clear that the rule of the time of calamity she got after a lot of calculations is actually not perfect. The last adventure made her realize a very serious problem, which is the variability of the time of calamity. Due to lack of practice, she once thought that she could use the rule to calculate the calamity one day in the future and predict it in advance to avoid the disaster. Because as a variable value, the probability of any event happening can't reach 100%, so there is a possibility that it won't happen. Even if the probability is so small that it can be ignored, it is not absolute. Therefore, before this, she entered a misunderstanding. She only thought that there is no 100% probability of it happening, and she ignored that relatively speaking, there is also no 100% probability of it not happening. Assuming that the probability is 0, it will happen, and the probability is 1, then the probability can be 0 or 1, both are phenomena from a mathematical point of view. In Yu Shu's previous life, there was no such thing as an absolute 0 and 1 when it came to risk budgeting. In layman's terms, it was Daoist Qing Zheng's saying, disasters can be avoided but not eliminated. Yu Shu gives herself a very simple example. If she now calculates that both Xia Mingming and Yu Xiaoxiu will encounter a fire tomorrow night, then she can basically determine that the inn will be on fire that night. She can calculate this incident and leave the inn in advance. At worst, she can stay on the street for the whole night, and she can also ask the guests to leave the inn that night. This is called avoided. However, she has no ability to eliminate this fire. Whether it will happen or not, it is not something she can control as a mortal. This is called cannot eliminate. Perhaps when she has the ability to judge blessing and misfortune like Qing Zheng, she may be able to eliminate the calamity. But the law of nature goes round, and if one is not happy, the price of eliminating the calamity is unimaginable. The harvest is not only this. Yu Shu collects the variable value of Yu Xiaoxiu's disaster and adds it to her value library of the time of calamity rule. When she encounters similar values, she can make a more accurate judgment. Ugh. Yawning, Yu Shu put down her brush and stretched herself. She rotated her sore neck twice, making creaking sounds. She reorganized the contents of the law of rain and the law of time of calamity into her leather bag and stuffed it under the bed. She thought to herself that she still had to think of a way to get a few charcoal pens. Brushes were too slow to do calculations. The new house was empty for 3 days. During these days, Yushu took the opportunity to wander around Autumn Osmanthus Lane twice a day to explore the market. She also bought some divination tools for setting up a stall in the future, such as divinatory plates, notes, almanac, tortoise plates, etc. Although she may not necessarily use them for her divination, it is necessary to use them as a front. Xia Mingming's request for the recommendation letter did not seem to have made any progress. Yushu did not ask about it again. The two of them slept in the same room at night. Yushu did not take the initiative to talk to Xia Mingming, and Xia Mingming did not talk to her either. However, as usual, Yushu chatted and laughed in front of Yu Xiaoxiu and Jing Qin. In the eyes of the two, they did not know that the two of them were quarreling and thought that Xia Mingming was throwing a tantrum. After breakfast, Yushu took Jing Qin to Huixing Street to look at the house after Xia Mingming left. When they met a familiar neighbor in the alley, Yushu was very easygoing to greet them. When asked about Jing Qin, she said that he is a brother who will live together in the future. The lock of the new house was changed by Yushu. It cost Yushu 2 taels of silver to change the lock. There were only 3 keys, which Yushu kept for herself and did not give to anyone else. As soon as they entered the house, Yushu first closed the door, blocking the curious eyes from the outside. She pulled Jing Qin to the door of the west room, pushed open the door and pushed him in. She could not wait to ask, "How is it? Quickly let me see, is the house clean now?" It is not that Yushu does not have other ways to appraise the changes in the feng shui of the new house, but with Jing Qin here, there is no need to search far away. Jing Qin raised his head to look at the roof, then looked at the window. Under Yushu's slightly nervous gaze, he nodded to her. This house indeed did not make him feel uncomfortable that day. Yushu clapped her hands and said happily, "It's good that everything is fine. You look around again, I will go measure the size of the other rooms so that we can buy furniture later." In fact, when it comes to feng shui houses, Yushu is completely a novice. Buying this haunted house is not without a trace of risk. Now that she has succeeded, the stone in her heart has finally been lifted. Her whole body is light, thinking about how she bought such a good house with only 50 taels of silver. She cannot help but feel a little complacent. But she still has to thank Jing Qin. Without his discerning eyes, how can she pick up such a bargain? "Here, take it, this is the key to our family's wedding. You carry it with you, don't lose it." Yushu solemnly handed a key to Jing Qin. Jing Qin looked at the slender key in his palm, his ears caught the word family from Yushu's mouth, his heart suddenly moved, he held the key in his hand. Yushu brought a tape measure with her, excitedly measuring the length of each room. Jing Jian very carefully walked around the house, he did not find anything unusual. The two returned to the inn. Yushu in the afternoon made 2 lists. She found that there are really a lot of things to buy. Considering the amount of money in her pocket, she had no choice but to cross off some of the decorations. She can only tidy up when she has spare money in the future. Today seems to be a good day. Not only the matter of the house is settled, at night, Xia Mingming came back with another good news. "Here." Xia Mingming put a letter with 4 corners neatly on the table in front of Yushu. Yushu did not need to open it to know what it was. Looking at Xia Mingming's suntanned oval face, she did not know why, she felt a little gratified. "I said I will get the recommendation letter." Xia Mingming sat down beside Yushu, proudly raised his chin, looking straight at her, not to show off but to seek approval. 3 days ago she made a bet with herself. If she did not get the recommendation letter, she was not allowed to talk to Ashu. The process was bitter, but she did it. Yushu raised her hand and pressed on the recommendation letter. She smiled at Xia Mingming. "Not bad." Xia Mingming proudly said, "Yes." Luo replied, only taking Yushu's words as praise. She felt indescribably carefree. It was more comfortable than giving her 4th sister a slap a few months ago. When it was time to eat dinner, Yushu and Xia Mingming reconciled. The two of them hadn't spoken in the morning, but now they were talking one after another, causing Yu Xiaoxiu, who was watching from the side, to be confused. Yu Xiaoxiu was very curious about how Xia Mingming got the recommendation letter from Master Yi, but Xia Mingming was not willing to tell him, so he could not pry her mouth open. Yushu did not ask much, and after dinner she returned to her room with Xia Mingming. As soon as they entered the room and closed the door, Xia Mingming said to Yushu, "You can do whatever you want about Jing Qin. Don't worry, I will not tell anyone. Just pretend that I don't know he is a Taoist priest from Longhu Mountain." These 2 days she had thought it through. Compared to quarreling with Ashu, she would rather not care about Jing Qin. Anyway, Ashu had more ideas than her, so he would not be at a disadvantage. Hearing her words, Yushu, of course, felt that it could not be better. She hummed and changed the topic. "I have bought the house. If you are free tomorrow, go to the wood shop with me to choose furniture and work hard for a few days. Xia Mingming originally planned to sleep in tomorrow, but after hearing Yu Shu's words she dismissed the idea. Okay, what do you want to buy? There are a lot of things to buy. Yu Shu took out the list she wrote in the afternoon and showed it to her. As soon as Xia Mingming heard that the house would be decorated from scratch, she became interested. The two discussed for half the night, then put out the oil lamp and went to sleep. The next day Yu Shu and Xia Mingming went to a few wood shops and asked about the price. Finally they chose one and ordered a batch of furniture, including 4 frame beds, 3 folding screens, 2 study tables, 1 dining table, 1 vertical bookcase, 1 vertical cupboard, 2 wardrobes and a number of chairs and stools. After paying the deposit, Yu Shu left the address of the house and asked the shopkeeper to check and send it to Huixing Street. After that, she and Xia Mingming went to look at other houses on the street and then went back home. Come in. Yu Shu opened the door and turned sideways to let Xia Mingming enter. As soon as Xia Mingming entered the yard, she looked around curiously. Unexpectedly, after looking at a few places, her expression suddenly changed. She pointed at the bagua mirror on the east door with a red string and said in surprise, using laughter to break the yin, "There is evil in this house?" It was Yu Shu's fault that she forgot to destroy the corpse yesterday and didn't take off the bagua mirror, which was used to exorcise evil. Xia Mingming, a knowledgeable person, saw the clues. Since she was discovered, Yu Shu didn't play dumb. She nodded and said, "This house used to have a lot of yin qi, but I have already avoided it and fixed the eyes of the house. Now the feng shui is stable." After hearing Yu Shu's words, Xia Mingming's expression didn't return to normal. Instead, she looked at Yu Shu angrily and said, "Why do you want to buy a haunted house? I don't want to live here." Here it comes again. If this young Mrs. Temper doesn't flare up, her whole body will be unhappy. Yu Shu secretly rolled her eyes and pointed at the west room and said, "What are you afraid of? The dead person is in that room. You sleep in this room, it's not the same room. Don't worry, the dead person is a weak scholar. Even if he really becomes a ghost, he won't harm people. Who knows, maybe he will go to the opposite room in the middle of the night and find you to recite poems." Xia Mingming's face turned pale. She looked at the direction Yu Shu was pointing at and shivered. She crossed her arms and quickly moved behind Yu Shu. She stuck close to her and stuttered, "You don't scare me. My father said that there are no ghosts in this world." Just as she finished speaking, she felt Yu Shu's body tremble. Suddenly she let out 2 eerie chuckles and slowly turned her head. The joints of her neck emitted a cracking sound. She stared at her with a strange, gloomy gaze and said lightly, "Who said there are no ghosts? Miss, this scholar pays his respects." With a scream, Xia Mingming's eyes rolled back and she fainted on the ground. Chapter 148. Oh, I forgot to send it when I fell asleep. I need to send it now. After being scared by Yu Shu, when Xia Mingming woke up again, she knew that she had been teased by Yu Shu and cried for a while. Because Yu Shu had scared the little girl until she fainted, it was inevitable that she would admit her mistake due to her guilty conscience. After a series of comforting words, she finally coaxed Xia Mingming with great difficulty. Her forehead was full of sweat. Strangely enough, Xia Mingming doesn't care much about the fact that her new residence is a haunted house. The lumber shop delivers the furniture to Huixing Street. 2 strong men, under the direction of Yu Shu, put the tables, chairs and bedside tables in place. She checks to make sure that nothing is missing. Then she pays the remaining money to the assistant manager who comes to deliver the furniture. Seeing that Xia Mingming doesn't look well, Yu Shu has to take half a day off and send her back to the inn. The next day she doesn't dare to take her with her. When Xia Mingming is still sleeping, Yu Shu and Jing Chen and Yu Xiaoxiu go out alone. They buy pots and pans, firewood, rice, oil, salt and other sundries. They find a donkey cart to take them to Huixing Street and move them into the house one by one. Sweating profusely, they make a pile of firewood in the kitchen and burn it dry. There is a saying that if an empty house is left empty for a long time, before people move in, they should first light the stove for cooking. On one hand, it is to report to the kitchen god to ensure prosperity, and on the other hand, it is to drive away the impurities in the house. The next day, Yu Shu goes to several cloth shops to get the bedding and pillows that she ordered a few days ago. She goes back to make the bed, hang the bed curtain and tie the door curtain. After tidying up, the house finally looks like a home. Although it doesn't have richly ornamented beams, it is at least a clean and comfortable house. Looking at the new house, Yu Shu has a sense of achievement. She locks the door and walks all the way back to the inn. She calls the three people together and announces the good news: "We will move tomorrow. Pack up and check out in the morning. Let's go home." Hearing this, Yu Xiaoxiu is the happiest and Xia Mingming is the most reluctant. Jing Qin sees that Yu Shu is happy, so he is happy with her. The four people pay the bill at Yunlai Inn. They take Kim Bao and go to Huaisheng Street with their luggage. Pushing open the door, Yu Xiaoxiu was the first to rush in. He looked through the rooms one by one and asked Yu Shu, who was in the courtyard, "Which room do I sleep in?" Yu Shu points to the largest suite on the north side and says, "You and Jing Qin sleep in that room. I asked someone to separate the bedrooms with a screen. There are 2 beds. You sleep in the inner bed." Xia Mingming can't help but say, pointing to the room on the west where no one has died. She says, "I don't want to sleep in that room." Yu Shu nods and points to the room on the east side. "You sleep there." In this way there is only one room left for her to live in, which is the dirty room on the west side. It is not that she is stupid and bold, but there are only 3 rooms in the house. They are 2 men and 2 women, so they can only allocate it this way. It is not good to ask Xia Mingming or Jing Qin to sleep in the room where no one has died. After all, she bought this haunted house. Without waiting for Xia Mingming to object, Yu Shu claps her hands and says, "Go back to the room and put down your luggage. There is a cabinet. Pack your clothes." After saying that, she turns to walk to the room on the west side. However, someone is 1 step faster than her. Yu Shu sees Jing Qin push the door open and enters the room. She thinks that he did not hear her allocation, so she hurriedly follows him. "Jing Qin, you and Xiaoxiu share a room. I will sleep in this room." Jing Qin puts the bag with 2 sets of clothes on the bed. He turns back and shakes his head at Yu Shu. He sits on the bed. His meaning is obvious. He wants to sleep in this room. Seeing this, Yu Shu's heart warms. Of course, she will not think that Jing Qin likes to sleep in this room. She still remembers the first day when she brought Jing Qin to look at the house. He said that this room makes him uncomfortable. Even though it is clean now, people always care about it. For example, if the bed sheet is stained with someone else's feces, even if the dirty thing is removed and the bed sheet is washed, there will be no smell at all. Who would be willing to sleep on the dirty bed sheet again after seeing it with their own eyes? Just thinking about it makes them feel disgusted. But now Jing Qin wants to fight for the bed sheet with her. It is just because he does not want her to sleep here. She feels like she is being protected. To be honest, it is not bad. Yu Shu embarrassedly touches her head. She walks to sit next to Jing Qin. She puts her hands on her knees and leans forward. She turns to look at him and says seriously, "She is a girl. You live opposite her. It will be inconvenient to wake up early and sleep late. You can look up and look down. It is troublesome to open the window. I will sleep here. You can sleep in the same room with Xiaoxiu." Jing Qin picks up Yu Shu's hand on her knees and writes, "I don't look at her." Yu Shu chuckles. Seeing Jing Qin's serious expression, she can't help but want to tease him. She turns her face and says deliberately, "I don't believe you. She is a girl and she is beautiful. Anyone would want to look at her more. Why don't you like to look at her?" She pauses and sneaks a glance. She sees Jing Qin lowering his head and seriously writing on her palm, "I only like to look at Xiaoyu." After saying that, he tilted his head to look at her. His clear eyes that were as clear as spring water reflected her clear facial features, as if he was trying to verify the truth of his words. Yu Shu is stunned. She only feels that her palm is suddenly scalded. She quickly retracts her hand. Her face is inexplicably hot. Her eyes wander around, not knowing where to look. Anyway, she doesn't dare to look at Jing Qin again. She stands up from the bed and coughs, "If you want to sleep, you can sleep here." She hurriedly walks out. She didn't look at where she was and tripped on the door sill. She falls to the ground with a loud sound. Jing Qin is shocked. He quickly gets up to help her. In the other 2 rooms, Yu Xiaoxiu and Xia Mingming heard the movement. They also poke their heads out. When they see Yu Shu on the ground, they quickly surround her. "What happened? What happened? Where did you fall?" It's bleeding." "Ashu, your nose is bleeding. I will go get a handkerchief." "Brother Jing, don't use your sleeves to wipe her nose. The more you wipe, the more it will bleed." Yu Shu covers her almost broken nose. Her knees and elbows are burning. Her eyes are filled with tears. Looking at the 3 people in front of her, she closes her eyes and curses in her heart, "This is so embarrassing." Because Yu Shu was accidentally injured, she can't participate in the cleaning of the new residence. Xia Mingming sweeps the floor, Yu Xiaoxiu wipes the table, and Jing Qin is the tallest. He is assigned to clean the windows. Yu Shu lies on the bed, groaning. When she sees them pass by the window, she will order them with a nasal voice. Xiao, wipe the table legs. Ming, don't just sweep the places you can see. You have to sweep the corners too. Jing, you have been using that rag for a long time. Why don't you wash it? Won't it still be dirty if you wipe it? Ming, after half an hour, Xia Ming can't stand it anymore. He throws the broom on the ground, hands on his waist, and said to Yushu, who is lying on the bed, "Can you close your eyes and sleep without talking?" Yushu knew that she was nagging, but when she saw them working, she realized that apart from Xiao, no one else could make her feel at ease. However, it was not very pleasant for her to be directing others while they were working. Yushu was about to reply that she was going to sleep when she heard Xiao say, "What's wrong with her talking? She's not afraid that you won't be able to clean up." In fact, Xiao also dislikes his sister. But she is his sister, so there is nothing that she can't say. Being ridiculed by Xiao, Xia Ming immediately gets angry. "If I can't clean it properly, then you do it." "Fine, I'll do it. You clean the table." Xiao throws the rag away and picks up the broom. "Humph, I'll do it." Xia Ming goes forward to grab the rag, so the two of them take turns. They work much harder than before. Jing Qin, on the other hand, did not complain at all. He washed the rag and came back, continuing to wipe the windows that were difficult to clean. Yushu saw that there was nothing left for her to do. She yawned, closed her eyes, and really fell asleep. When she wakes up, the room is clean. Xiao is sitting at the head of her bed, fanning her. Kim Bao is sleeping on his lap. Xia Ming and Jing Chen are nowhere to be seen. No wonder it's so cool. Yushu rubs her eyes and sits up. Where are they? Brother Jing went back to his room to rest. Ming went out to buy food. In terms of age, Xiao should call Xia Ming's sister, but he doesn't know why, but he doesn't want to call her sister. After Yushu persuades him several times, he calls Xia Ming like her. It's already noon. Yushu had a good sleep. Although she was hurting all over from the fall, lying in her own bed at home was different from anywhere else. Jing Chen insists on sleeping in the west room, so Yushu and Xiao sleep in the same room. Anyway, they have been living in the same room for a long time. Now there is a screen between them, so there is no discomfort. There is no well in the yard, so Yushu bought a big water tank with a bucket and a shoulder pole. Seeing that Yushu is awake, Xiao puts down the fan and brings Kim Bao to Yushu to look after. He goes out to pick up the shoulder pole and fetches water from the well at the end of the street. He has done this before in Yang, so there is no need for Yushu to teach him. Originally, Yushu planned to buy vegetables to cook, but because of the fall, she has to give up. Xia Ming brought back food, so they make do with it and fill their stomachs. After a busy day, except for Yushu, everyone is tired and sweaty. Because they forgot to buy a bathtub, Xiao boiled a few pots of hot water. They take turns to wash in the kitchen with the door closed. Even Kim Bao is scrubbed. In the evening, Yushu's muscles and bones had recovered, so she took them out to find a restaurant on Huixing Street. They ordered a table of appetizers and a pot of wine to celebrate their new home. The homebrewed wine has no alcohol content, so it is not intoxicating. Except for Jing Chen, the four of them share 2 cups. It is not that Yushu does not allow Jing Chen to drink, but Jing Chen frowns when he smells the wine. Obviously he does not like it, so Yushu does not force him to drink. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, they wander back to their new house. After washing up, they go back to their rooms to sleep. In the quiet night, Yushu lay on her clean new bed. Moonlight shone through the window, shrouding the room in tranquility. She turned over and whispered to Xiao. "Xiao, are you asleep?" In response to her is a light snore. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.